Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Adcast. So this episode marks the end of our weekly catch-up sprint, and instead of returning to our normal schedule, we decided we'd try a new one. So from now on, the Adcast will upload once a month on the last Sunday of each month, and this won't include seasonal anime episodes, which will go up whenever they're ready and timely. So those might actually turn around faster than they used to. We decided to try this new schedule because we wanted to do episodes about longer topics like games and anime with like multiple seasons that might take more than like a week or two to get through. Obviously we're busy people and we have lives to live outside of the podcast, as much as I would love to just live inside the podcast world forever. But yeah. Our next regular episode will come out at the end of June, and it'll be about Haikyuu. But I promise that we will not leave you hanging until then. I promise there will be something cool and exciting coming out at the end of May on the last Sunday. So look forward to that. Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Atcast, a podcast for the study of modern visual culture. I'm your reincarnated villainess, Soup.
And I'm your Gyaru with the dinosaur companion, Renu.
Wow, I kind of stumbled over my words there, but that's okay.
You nailed it. I think you got it.
Okay, fair enough. This week, AT stands for Absolute Territory, because we will be covering the Spring 2020 season.
Woo!
But before we get into that, what have we been up to in these trying times, Renu? It's been a little bit since we've recorded, mostly because the podcast went on an unexpected hiatus, because it took me a long time to learn Reaper. Even now, I feel like I still don't really have it. But I feel like I've done some work to try and get there. I had a friend help me out, who's like, pretty good at using the program.
That's good.
But so we had an episode come out. And we're recording it the week after it has come out, or the week of it coming out, something like that. That's exciting.
Yeah.
That's exciting.
Hot off the presses.
Hot off the presses. Even though this episode is going to come out in like 2 weeks. Oh, it's whatever, we have it up, so that's all that matters. That's all that matters.
Not hot off the presses.
As hot off the presses as we can manage, I mean, I was also busy doing other stuff, so naturally that will also eat into my time. And also, I don't know, it's just kind of a pain to learn a new thing. Like, it's so much work.
Of course. Yeah, I've been learning Vegas Pro as well to switch over off of Adobe. And
right. Yeah.
That was a little bit.
I will say this, it's a pain because, like, unfortunately, Adobe still has kind of the market on like a lot of the most like sort of approachable, easy to understand, powerful workflows. It's very helpful that you can just kind of put things from one program into another program. It's kind of, there's no real video editing software that's as good as Adobe Premiere.
Yeah.
Which is like disappointing. At the very least, Reaper is as powerful, if not more, than Audition. It's just a little bit finicky-er to use. It's a lot less intuitive, so I kind of vaguely understood the things that I needed to do to the audio, but I didn't know how to do them and how to do them effectively, because Adobe makes it really easy. So
right.
That's how it's been on the podcast front, I suppose. What have you been up to? It's been like 2 weeks, right?
Yeah, well, yeah, so for me, I've been able to work from home, which is great, but in my downtime, since we don't go anywhere, it's mostly been gardening, which my friend has been calling IRL Animal Crossing.
Wow, that's like... You're like really getting to that point where you're like becoming like an old Asian man, Like it always starts with gardening, and then you're like placing rocks everywhere, and you're just like, I found this rock in the river, and you're like polishing it. You're like, this is my rock.
Start building things around the house.
Yeah. You'll like learn how to like do like carpentry and stuff. Like,
Yeah.
I'm telling you, this is the first step.
I'll become my father, don't worry.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's been that, and that's been fun. And we've been clearing like little areas around the house to like garden and stuff, because it's mostly been like covered in like trash from like previous tenants and stuff, like not like a junk pile kind of deal, but like when we unearth the soil, there's trash underneath, and so we're like, ew.
Oh, I see.
So it's been
Ugh.
cleaning all of that out and putting pretty flowers over it, so that's been fun.
That's nice.
Yeah. Otherwise, it's just been like games and stuff.
Right,
So,
right.
Yeah.
True.
I tried out Persona 5 Royal.
Oh.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And we got through the first dungeon, which
Okay.
is fun. Seeing all the different changes that they made has been pretty good. Like, the way that they've been incorporating Kasumi from the very beginning is interesting.
Okay. I
Like-
still don't understand what her role is in the game.
Yeah, I don't either. They foreshadow it during the intro sequence, but otherwise, they've been pretty thorough in incorporating her better than Maria?
Oh, right, in like Golden.
From Golden, yeah. So I appreciate that. And she definitely seems like she is her own entity, which is cool.
Okay.
So I'm
I
looking
was-
forward to that.
I'm just confused because I thought she was just gonna be like a female playable character.
Yeah, or there were people who were speculating that she would be, like kind of like how Persona 3 had like the female
Well,
protagonist.
yeah.
Yeah.
So that's what I assumed it would be, but apparently
Right.
not.
Yeah. No, I thought so too, but no, she's a
Well, because her outfit is like so similar to Joker's anyway.
mm-hmm.
Oh well, I guess.
Yeah. So I don't know. I guess they wanted to go this route. However, they want to incorporate her in the story. I'm interested in seeing it, and I imagine you'll be able to romance her, so she's like another waifu option. So-
Sure. I mean,
Yeah. So that's been
every
fun.
game has one.
Yeah. Right.
like this is a female character, like comma basic.
Yes. Yeah.
know-
You look at her and it's like, yes, she is romanceable.
Well, she gives off like a vibe similar to, and this is just from her design because I actually haven't seen anything of Royal, but she kind of gives off like a Yukari vibe where it's like she just happens to be a person that you meet and is a character that you could probably date for some reason, right?
That is definitely the vibe that I get, except she's like a little more designed. Like she
Okay.
definitely
Right.
feels like I was designed to be your waifu, kind of.
Interesting.
Character.
All right.
Yeah.
Sure, Persona, whatever you say. I'm
I mean,
really
That's how
interested.
they approach a lot of female characters, you know?
Right. I'm really interested because it's like, why?
Yeah, I'm also interested in why.
And like, also why the game like that. But
Yeah.
I don't know. I'm interested in all the changes just because
Yes.
I liked Persona 5 and I am
Yeah.
curious about Royal.
I am curious if they remedied any of the complaints that we had when we first reviewed it.
Apparently there's more Akechigoro in Royal, and I'm not sure how to feel about that because it's like, on one hand, yes, this character was a massive, like, just terrible royal fuck up, and you handled him so poorly, and then he just like sacrifices himself, and it's just like, well, okay, but like, one, that's such a cliche. Two, a character shouldn't have to die to become like redeemable. Three, like he wasn't well written to begin with, so it's not like anybody was like sympathizing with him. Four, like you know,
They also didn't give him like a very satisfying ending, like
No,
the
no, he
whole
just
resolution
dies.
of the game. Yeah, no, they dropped him like a hot potato.
So I'm interested because it's like if they decide to make it so that he is better written and better handled,
Yes, that's what I want.
do I actually want that is my question. Like, do I actually want that in the game? Like,
I want it.
Is Akechigoro a redeemable character? And the answer
that's fair.
the answer to that is like I don't know, and I'm not sure how to feel about that. Like,
right,
do you know what I mean?
But you can't write him out though is the thing, and so that's why like for me Persona 5 was the near perfect game for me, but he was the problem. And
okay,
so that's
fair
why
enough.
I want them to like just do the best they can to like remedy that, and then we'll be good.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
I don't know. Like I hope they can do something nice, but like
Yeah.
it just I have some concerns.
Yeah, I mean,
say the
I'll
least.
report back when I finish it. I'm sure I'll have words to say. So
Okay. That's fine. That's good. Cool.
yeah.
That's nice.
Mhm.
Anything else?
Other than that, we have been playing Final Fantasy 14.
Right.
Which my free trial ended a bit ago, and so I haven't been playing it anymore after that. Because I feel like after playing it for a month.
Okay.
I have like solidified my feelings about it, which the pros are that it's very pretty. It is a functional game. It is it has lots of updates, like new events and stuff like that. It's highly supported. Lots of people playing it, so it has a really active player base. I keep getting promised that the story will be better in the DLC, but I never reached the DLC.
Yeah.
And I guess that's it. And then the cons of it are mostly quality of life issues, which I'm not even sure they would be able to like overhaul and remedy at this point. Like I think some of them they could, but some of them they are just content with making more new stuff rather than fixing the old beginner stuff.
Mm-hmm.
One of those is that, and this is so basic, is your quest markers for your goal endpoint, right? You know, when they show on your map where you need to go, they don't show the elevation that the goal is at.
No, I agree with you that this is a problem. The maps in Final Fantasy XIV are so vertical.
Yes.
It's so difficult to tell like
Yeah.
where you are in relation to anything else. Like they really should have had at least 2 maps, if not like a 3D map, right?
Yeah.
Like they should show you a vertical map. You're absolutely correct.
Yeah, there are a couple of ways to approach it, but yes, there are so many instances where you'll be circling like the base of a mountain, or you're on the wrong floor of a town, and you wouldn't even be able to really tell until you've searched the entire area and not found what you needed to find. And so you go to the next level and you're like, oh my god, there it is. So there's a lot of that. I feel like the gameplay itself is, I think I said this before, but it's very reminiscent of Final Fantasy XII, which I wasn't overly fond of. If only because, like, at least in this game, it feels like I'm just watching the cooldown meter for my moves versus, like, actually engaging in battle. And dodging is basically just walking out of the AoE circles. And that's not very fun. I don't know. So it's just not very like I feel no need to strategize, you know? Except for when the difficulty actually spikes, which is during some of the tougher raids, I guess. Like that time that you and I got our butts kicked over and over again in that one temple place.
That was so holy shit, that was so funny.
But
we kept we kept wiping, and like I began to realize that, like, it wasn't even my fault, because I assumed
It wasn't.
that, like,
It was not your fault. Yeah.
I assumed that it was, and because I always assume it's my fault. I'm like, oh no, that was my bad. I like didn't heal you at the right time. And then I realized, wait, our tank is like just straight up dying to the like doom like status.
Our tank didn't know the mechanics for the boss, which they fully admitted to.
Yeah, I mean, and that's always the trouble with MMOs is that, like, especially Final Fantasy 14, it's it's like really reliant on your tanks actually knowing the fight, which can make progressing through them quite difficult otherwise. Luckily, they remedied that with like raid finders and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It is an interesting dynamic that the tank has to know. I mean, not just their own role, but also they have to know the dungeon layout. They have to know how the bosses function, like all of that jazz. And I think it puts like a lot of pressure on them.
Tanks tend to be, and this is true across a lot of games. Tanks tend to be in-game leaders because the role of a tank is to control a lot more than the like kind of micro bar you have. It's a lot more about knowing everything and how it works in relation to itself. And I will say this, I think a lot of your problems are, like, you know, legitimate concerns to have. I know that they're basically in the works, you know, before the whole pandemic thing. There was something in development where they were going to essentially truncate the, like, main story of the, like, base game so that it's not as terrible and grindy and boring as it is, because you're absolutely right. This is a problem that most people have with Final Fantasy XIV. It's the reason a ton of people bounce off of it, which is that the story until you get into like halfway through the post patches of like the main game are not that interesting. There's like a little bit of like cool setup. There's like a little bit of history there, but for the most part, you're just kind of playing errand boy as you do in most MMOs. And it's not well written enough yet to really justify that. Like, there's nothing that interesting going on. Honestly, you could easily skip all of the dialogue, watch a 5-minute recap of what happens, and then be prepared for the expansions. Which is why most people just buy the skip pass. I will say this. This is a problem that all MMOs have, where early game leveling is so boring. And it's somewhat necessary to take it a little bit slowly, because otherwise it's very difficult to learn all your cooldowns and how they work. Like, this is a problem specifically with Final Fantasy XIV, which is that when you switch jobs, some of them start at level like 50. And so if you like if you're like, okay, I've been playing like Conjurer Conjurer White Mage until now, and I've decided that I want to learn how to play let's say Dancer. Right? Well, suddenly you're a level 50 class, and you have all of the cooldowns of a level 50 class, and you have to like learn them all at once. And that can be a little overwhelming if you at least didn't go through the progression of one class before. But at the same time, you're completely right. It's a little bit whatever until you get to a point where your life is actually vaguely in danger. And it's not that interesting until you get into dungeons where like you actually have to coordinate with other people. And
exactly.
Honestly, it takes a long time to get there, and it's completely okay to just say, like, well, I don't really want to invest that amount of time to get there. Like, if I have to, like, as far as a value proposition goes, for a lot of people, like, it is not worth it for it to be like, well, it will take you 60 levels to get to where the game is fun, right? Like, we just don't have that time, and that's understandable.
That's definitely the biggest thing, is the time investment that it takes for X thing to get interesting, right? And that's why a lot of people bounce off of like longer running series and stuff like that, like Gintama, for example. You kind of have to go with the caveat of, it doesn't really get interesting until after episode 50.
Like,
and I have to watch 50 episodes first.
You either have to be really invested in getting to the point where like the story is like actually compelling, or you just have to be really into the gags, which is how I got through it.
I don't know. I mean, it's good to hear that I mean, of course they know that it's a problem, that they're actually willing to maybe do something about it.
Mm-hmm.
that's very promising, and that might be worth going back to the game later,
Well,
or recommending it to people, but
to be,
not right now.
I mean, to be entirely fair to the game, people didn't really think that it would survive that long because the previous MMO didn't really, and it's kind of
Yeah.
a miracle that it did. And it seems
Yeah.
like a lot of that came about in the sort of expansions where like it actually started to like really gain a lot of traction. So,
Yeah.
like you just kind of, I don't know. I feel like if you want to get through Final Fantasy 14, you just have to treat the base game like it's different, and you kind of have to get through it, which is like a lot to ask of a person. Personally, I am like a fourth or something through the like post patches, and I haven't really had time to go through them recently because I've been working on like freelance stuff. I had like a deadline, and I needed to do that instead of playing an MMO, which takes a lot of time.
Yeah.
And my subscription actually ran out, but I'm going to look to re-up it and put some more time in when I can. Yeah, I mean the fun of it is obviously just to play it all together as a group of friends. Like an MMO is like the easiest sort of base game to have. That's like, okay, this is consistent. It is.
Oh, yeah.
There's a constant sense of progression, and you're together with your friends. Let's go on an adventure, right?
Mm-hmm.
So hopefully, like we as a group can get to that point. I know most of us are still like quite busy. Like God knows I never stop doing things.
Yeah, I mean the most fun parts that I had in the game, which I figured would be the case, were when we were getting our butts beat in the dungeons. Like
yeah, no, that's fun. It's fun.
Yeah, no, the like. And not in like a masochistic way, but like, it's just fun to like strategize together and be like,
if
like
you're gonna wipe,
being challenged,
it's fun to wipe with your friends. It's well, I mean that's kind of the feeling that you chase when you play an MMO, which is that feeling of like failing and overcoming something.
You
with
overcome
your
something together, and that's a lot of fun.
Yeah,
and
which is which is why Log Horizon is the perfect MMORPG anime because it's literally about that.
Maybe that's the next one we try.
Oh, I mean, it's not an MMO, but it is.
No, I'm just kidding. Yeah, no, it's so. It was funny because one of the times that we, that I played with some of our friendsies was, we ended up starting the dungeon accidentally without a tank.
Oh, okay.
We didn't discuss which classes we were going to be beforehand, but we had a 4-man party. And so we were like, okay, well, one of us is going to be the tank. And so I took healer, and then the other 3 picked DPS.
Oh my.
Oh my. This dungeon, which was, it would have been just fine. And, basically just your like a very average run. It would have been, almost cakewalk with a normal party comp. Suddenly we were wiping like 3 times.
Jeez.
Trying to get through, but we would have to like quit, and reform the party and all that if we wanted to like go in, with a proper party. And so we just decided to stick it out because it was funny and it was difficult and it was a lot of fun.
Fair enough.
So I guess that's one way to go hard mode.
I have been missing MMO times, unfortunately, because of work, but I hope to come back to it.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know if I'll be coming back to FF14 anytime soon, just because, my trial's out and I don't know. I got tired.
Very fair, very fair.
But there were... I also don't really agree with the setup either, that you start off in different towns and you can't really play with your friends until you reach like level 15 in the story quest.
Yeah, it's a little obnoxious.
Because the whole point is to play with your friends and do missions together.
Mm-hmm.
And then you can't.
I think this is actually just a problem I have with most MMOs, which is that like games like Final Fantasy 14 and for a long time World of Warcraft are known for having like these like really compelling like nice stories, and I'm sure that I will enjoy the later bits of the Final Fantasy XIV story because it's like just evidently super anime, and I love that.
Yeah.
But like one of the biggest issues I have with MMOs, especially like MMOs that have survived the test of time, is a lot of them have stories that are about how like cool and special and like single player you are,
I
when
hate
in
that.
reality that's not how you engage with the game. So it's a little
Yeah.
like incongruous in like a weird
Yeah.
way. I honestly wish that we had an MMO that was just like, I don't know, man, fuck it, get together, go on an adventure with your friends, like
Yes.
do whatever you want. And of course I understand it's a massive undertaking, but like it's kind of weird to me that like MMOs didn't start in a place where you were the warrior of light, the chosen one,
Yeah.
the one who will bring peace to all. Like it just started with like, okay, here's a club, here's some pants, go fuck around with your friends, right?
Yeah.
And I'm
That's
kind of
what I
sad,
want.
right? Like,
Yeah.
like for a long time, games like MapleStory were kind of like that. But specifically, like the roots of like MMOs, like RuneScape was like that. Uh, Ultima Online was like that. You could do whatever the fuck you wanted in Ultima Online. Jesus Christ. I think EverQuest was like that to some extent. I don't actually know what the story of EverQuest was, but like, yeah, starting with like the modern age of MMOs with like World of Warcraft, like they for some reason come packed with these like epic generation spanning adventures where you are the chosen one. Just like, you might be misunderstanding something here. Like, I don't actually want that from an MMO. Like, from a single player game, sure, but like, I don't need to share that experience with a bunch of other people. I would rather like focus more on like what an adventure is like. But I mean, that's my personal
Yeah.
preference, I suppose.
No, that's my preference too, and I think that's one of the big reasons why I bounce off of MMOs as well, is because the stories all feel the same, and then the mechanics all feel the same, and then I just question, why did I pick up another MMO?
Okay, we'll just go back and we'll play Ragnarok Online.
Oh no!
I mean, like this is
Mojo
this is
anime.
the thing though, is that like the reason that trend came to be was that people realized, okay, well, you cannot have content that is player facing and player focused without having it be so broad to the point of nothing basically. Unfortunately, the reason those MMOs have stood the test of time is because people generally like more crafty experiences. But I think what people don't understand is like the things that people like about them aren't necessarily even the stories, even though it's like a bonus, right? Like people like well-crafted dungeons. It doesn't have to be like, well, this
Yeah,
dungeon is connected to the fate of the world. It's just like, okay, I want to beat up a big dragon, right? Like,
right.
you know,
Like that's cool.
I would
I
be
don't know.
interested to see if there was at any point in the future an MMO. Like, it is nearly impossible for an MMO to break into the market nowadays. Like, Final
Oh
Fantasy
yeah.
XIV was an anomaly, and like,
Yeah.
you got like a handful of like, Asian developed MMOs that are like free to play that technically are still running, but like at what cost, right? Yeah, I don't know. What a weird place. Anyway, I mean, I've honestly not been up to much. I've been working and playing video games and all that sort of stuff. Like I legitimately cannot think of the most interesting that happened to me anytime recently. Like I sanded a knife handle and
Ooh,
oiled it yesterday. Like
that's cool.
that is as exciting as my life gets now. It's just I restored a wooden handle on a knife. And mind you, I only had to restore it because my aunt accidentally put it into the dishwasher.
Oh,
I
don't
have
put your good knives in the dishwasher.
do not, especially if they are wooden handled, but even otherwise, do not. Like I have to. This is terrible. I have to make sure that the handle is like okay, and if it's not, I have to resand and oil it. I wish I had some like finer grits of sandpaper. My dad gave me the one sheet. Like he gave me a piece. He's like, here, use this. I'm like, okay, I guess I'll use this. Um, and and then I have to sharpen it afterwards. So
Yeah.
but after that, I'll make some delicious food and it'll be fun.
Hmm.
All that jazz. But yeah, no, really, really nothing that interesting. Like, I wish I could say that something was interesting, but it really hasn't. I've been okay. I'll tell you where I've been for the last like 2 weeks. I have been reading
Okay.
just a disgusting amount of manga, like just a gross
Oh my
amount.
god.
I went out and I read, and we'll talk about this later, but like we'll touch on it later. But like I read maybe every single villainous isekai like manga that has been scanlated.
Oh my god, dude.
If I was good at sourcing things and I was better at reading Japanese, I might have read all of them that exist by now. I have a lot of feelings about villainous isekai because
All
you
right,
know
we'll get into it.
the last time I got into isekai, I binged a bunch and then I formulated my thoughts about it. I have some thoughts about villainous isekai, which is I feel like it touches on a lot of different things, as opposed to sort of regular isekai.
Okay.
But that's a good segue. Let's talk about this season. So
Yeah.
the first two things are Fruits Basket season 2 and the 5th season of Shokugeki no Soma, which is the last season of Shokugeki no Soma. There's nothing really for us to say about that in the sampler. Like, there's shows that we like and we're gonna continue watching. So
Yeah.
you know, right, if you're watching them, you're probably it's because you already watched the previous season and you should watch them. And you know how this goes. You know how this goes.
Yes, there are no surprises here.
No surprises here. But let's talk about a surprise this season, which is Tower of God, or Kami no To. So this came about in an announcement a while ago from Crunchyroll saying that they were essentially just licensing a bunch of stuff, and like they're kind of acting as like a pseudo studio now, where they kind of like support and license a bunch of this stuff. It's just very, very interesting because this is probably the single biggest contributing factor to the growing like Western sort of influence over anime that isn't just like straight money, right?
Right.
Like the fact that it's like and this is very interesting because like we're getting like original anime licensed by Crunchyroll. We're getting adaptations of webtoons, specifically Tower of God, I think King of High School, and I think Girls of the Wild, which is another one that I've read, which is all right. The art is very good. I will say this: there was a while, it was like a time a while ago where I was reading a lot of Korean webtoons. I fell off a lot of them. A lot of them are like really slow because they're like here's the thing about Korean webtoons, which is that one, they're gorgeous, they're beautiful, they're 100% like almost all full color. I've yet to see one that isn't. They usually have a really high like quality of art. Like there's a really kind of cool sort of unique style to them that is different than Japanese manga or anime. But overall, a lot of them can be quite slow pacing wise because they follow this format that's like halfway between manga and like Chinese web novels, where like manga is like pretty fast. The pacing is usually pretty tight on manga. Whereas in Chinese web novels, the pace can be fast, but they pump those suckers out. Holy shit. Every time someone tells me about a Chinese web novel, I look it up and there's like 900 chapters. And I'm like, how do you have time to write this? What? Chinese web novels are so intense. Anyway, but webtoons kind of fall in between that. Tower of God specifically has a lot of pacing issues. It's really slow a lot of the time. And I refer to it as the Korean Hunter x Hunter because like the author has to just take a bunch of hiatuses because he gets like sick. It also has a similar like power system, etc., etc., etc. It feels a lot like Hunter.
Yeah,
actually.
It feels very Hunter x Hunter inspired, like down to their character designs and everything. I'm like, you got that from that character. You got that from that character.
I will say that there was a time when I was reading quite a lot of Tower of God, and I enjoyed it quite a bit. I'm really excited for the anime because we're like 4, 5, maybe 6 episodes in at this point, and so far it's been pretty good. Like, there are definitely points where it's a little bit slower, but on the whole, it's pretty engaging.
Yeah,
I would
say so. As someone who never read Tower of God, I only like heard about it because it was so, well known. The animation is very confident.
Oh, it's good. It's good.
Yeah, it looks great. I don't know if they've made any changes to the story, but at the very least, they've kept a consistent pace in the anime, which is nice. And so it's been engaging so far, and I'm looking forward to watching more.
Yeah, it's a marvel of production, actually. I will say this because so the studio behind it is Telecom Animation Film, which doesn't do a lot of they don't do a ton of seasonal shows really. Like they did the animation for All Out and some other stuff. But it's not nothing super notable, right? But they did the animation for the recent Lupin the Third films, not the 3D one. But as specifically the one I'm thinking of is the Goemon one, where if you've seen that fight of Goemon fighting a bunch of Yakuza, it's a very well animated sequence. But it's a decent enough studio, and the animation looks pretty good. Like the fight animations are pretty solid. There's nothing that is immediately offensive to me about them. Yeah. And it's interesting, right?
Yeah.
The music is by Kevin Penkin, who is the musician for Made in Abyss and Shield Hero. And if you remember the soundtrack from Made in Abyss, oh boy!
I mean, who
delicious.
would be able to forget it after listening to it if you watch the show?
It's so good. Kevin Penkin is a very talented musician, and I'm glad he's working on more anime projects because this is just delicious, tasty, so good. Mwah. Tasty. Yeah. I think the story is really good, but it's one of those stories that's it builds, right? It is a slow roll kind of building crescendo. I have no idea where the seasonal breaks will be, where the core breaks will be. But I hope, and this is because I realized that the last time I read Tower of God was maybe 5 years ago. So I remember very little about it, other than a couple of events that happen. Mostly I remember the characters. But if I don't remember a character, I just remember if I like or dislike them. I'm like, oh, I like that one. That's my favorite. Et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yep. A fun fact is I based one of my first D&D characters off of Rack Wraith Razor, who is the himbo alligator.
Nice.
He's angry and he wants to fight people all the time, but he just loves chocolate. He's big. Him big.
Yeah, him want to fight turtles all the time.
Yes. So yeah, that's Tower of God. I would highly recommend it. It's very unique that we get something that is an anime that is based on a Korean webtoon. That's pretty impressive. Webtoon anime themselves are not super well made. They don't get made very often. The last time I remember it was Relife probably, and the anime of Relife was pretty good. It fixed all of the pacing issues that webtoon had. That wasn't Korean, that was a Japanese webtoon though, so it'd be like that. But yeah, that's Tower of God. Let's talk about the next thing, which is Gleipnir.
We watched
an episode, maybe 2.
Yeah,
maybe 2.
I don't remember because I don't remember a lot of the show.
It is one of those shows that is how do I put this? It's one of those shows that is really, really dark and edgy and explores the limits of human psyche, but in a just like an edgy way, you know?
Yeah,
Like-
I remembered. I the reason that I wasn't, I guess, I don't remember a whole lot of it is because I remembered not having very much investment at all in what was happening. Like, I
No,
was like,
no.
I didn't find any of the characters particularly likable. The only reason I kept my eyeballs on it was because the animation was quite nice.
It's pretty good, yeah.
Yeah, like everyone's mouths are a little bit too big, but otherwise, like, it's a very pretty style.
It what Gleipnir reminds me of is or rather it to me feels like one of those shows that is like you will enjoy this if you just want to see like a like trash fire train, right? Like if you want a show where it's a bunch of like garbage people treating each other like garbage
Yeah,
and like it just doesn't stop, like
that's what it
that's
felt like.
probably
Yeah.
you'll probably enjoy this. Like I think it's just one of those things that's like you know, it's like smutty, it's like sexy, it's violent, it's gory, people go through hell. You will know if you like
Yeah.
that kind of thing, right?
Yeah,
Like,
yeah, you'll know right away from the first episode whether that is your shtick. For me personally, it was very much not. Like,
yeah,
I don't know,
yeah.
everything that happened, I was just kind of like, whatever, dude. And then it got to a point where I was able to predict exactly what was happening next, like him going to her place after she invited him, and then her immediately getting naked. I was like, she's probably gonna get naked, and that's exactly what she did. And then she's gonna get off of his business, and that's what she did. And she's gonna like kind of seduce him in this way, and that's what she did. Like, it was.
Yes, yep.
And then they got attacked, and I was like, cool. I figured that would happen too. And it was like, I'm not here. I can't be here for this anymore.
Yeah. Just not our cup of tea, really.
Yeah, but I completely understand if it is, because it's a very particular type of story that,
Mhm.
and it's a well done version of that particular type of story. So,
Yeah.
yeah,
I mean, it looks very good.
yeah.
I will say that.
It's like I said, it's really well animated, and yeah.
Okay.
So next we have Sing Yesterday for Me.
Okay.
Which,
Mhm.
yeah.
No, keep going.
Oh, okay. Which is by Kei Tome, whom I was familiar with and I screamed about during our trailer watch because I was like, I recognize that style. It's that author that did Lament of the Lamb, and I was right. Because she has a very particular, I don't know, I guess way of drawing people, a very particular art style that I just
Mhm.
have burned into the back of my brain somewhere. Because I read all 7 volumes of that manga, Lament of the Lamb, and this way of storytelling that she has, with where it's just like very kind of methodical, and then the characters are set up in such a way where you feel like the story could just go on for forever. That's that kind of storytelling. But Lament of the Lamb was like about vampires and these 2 siblings who it's like they're in love with each other.
Oh, it's like what's that other Nabokov novel that's like really really well known? Is it Arte?
Huh?
There is so Vladimir Nabokov is the person who wrote Lolita, but he wrote another novel that's about 2 siblings that are in an incestual relationship. I think it's
So this work at the very least is more of like a will they won't they kind of situation. Because they're like long lost siblings, and they're drawn to each other because of their bloodline, and also because the male protagonist is just now discovering that he's vampire, and so the female protagonist, who's his sister, she's been through all of this, and so she kind of like is there to help him, and so there's like a lot of weird dark issues that they go through in the work, and I just remember it going for forever, and I didn't even like the ending, and it's one of those works where you just kind of like hope things will work out for the best for these characters, even though you're not entirely rooting for them, but they're the only characters that are there, so you just kind of have to.
right.
And yeah, I get that almost exact same vibe from Sing Yesterday for me, because,
Mhm.
I mean, it's by the same person, but the story is also, it feels like it's told very similarly, too.
Mhm. Okay. Fair enough.
Yeah.
I have some thoughts about Sing Yesterday for me,
Yes, tell me.
which is I think that there is something very interesting and peculiar about anime and manga about like sort of coming of age, I guess, but like more of like what it was like feeling wise to live in the late 90s, early 2000s in Japan as a young person, right? Because you're just kind of coming off of this economic crash following like the biggest economic high that your country has ever seen. You are a person who is like doesn't fit the mold of society. You don't really want to be like a salary man. You don't want to like fit into that structure. There is a lot of disillusionment surrounding like what it means to have dreams and to follow those dreams, and
Yeah.
this is something that's felt very prominently, I think, in a lot of drama stuff that came out that is about this time period, from this time period. But it's
Yeah.
present even in things like Genshiken. If you look at Genshiken, there's a lot of anxiety about what it means to leave the safe kind of comfort of school where you get to be nerd with all your friends and like have to adjust to a society that doesn't really care about that, right?
Yeah.
And I think there's something to it because I think there's a lot of stuff that comes out that's very reflective of this mentality. It depicts it in a very like clear and raw and honest way that I think resonates with a lot of people for a lot of reasons. But at the same time, and this is not like so much a critique as it is like kind of just like me making a statement about it, but it's like it's not very critical about it. It's just kind of like I'm going to put this out here, like this is the feeling, this is the mood, and other people will resonate with it or they will not. And to me, when I watch Sing Yesterday for me, you have this guy who's like just come off of college, and he is in like kind of a dead end part-time job. He's trying to look for something that he wants to do, but he's not really sure what to do. His love life is not going like amazingly. He has a lot of like really complicated feelings connected to his past. It's like this narrative about moving into adulthood from a point which like you were already considered an adult anyway. And here's the thing, which is that like by all rights, like this theoretically should be something that like demographically resonates with me as a person who has just come out of college, as a person who is looking for a job. But it really doesn't, right?
That's interesting.
And I will kind of point to a couple of things, which is one, the way that they seem to be navigating around it is to have a quirky like female lead that is like she talks to like she has a pet crow and she's like I'm so in love with you, and he's like you're too young for me, and like the whole tension is like, oh, will they, won't they, like she's too young, but will you, because like it's okay because she's like a consenting adult. It's like, well, no.
Is she though?
Right? And it's like I've never like, you read one John Green novel and you're kind of done with Manic Pixie Dream Girls for the rest of your life, right? And it's kind of like, one, I think my personal feelings of like, well, you shouldn't have to look to another person to solve your feelings of like mediocrity and and inadequacy, right? Like, and two, as a person who has notably sort of critiqued the social structures we live under, a lot of it to me is just kind of like, well, you see, you feel these disillusionment feelings because society is bad and maybe we should do something about it. But it's understandable, right? Where like when I felt a lot like that when I was younger, actually, when I was like still in high school, where I was like, well, I'm gonna like graduate college and like probably end up in a lot of debt and work a dead end job until I die. that was kind of the mood. It was like I was like it was like just kind of angsty, like kind of upset at the world, disillusioned for sure. But at this point, it's just kind of like, oh, this is not like this doesn't resonate with me anymore. Maybe because I've gotten to a point in my life where even though I'm in a similar situation, I don't like I have enough people around me to support me to like not have to feel that way. And at the same time, I don't know. Like a lot of narratives in the 90s kind of eventually just wrap around to like either, they like he gets into a relationship and then that solves all his problems.
Right.
Or he makes a bunch of friends and it solves all his problems. And it's like I don't know. The point
Yeah. Go ahead.
No, I mean it's just like the point to me is like I'm more interested in like the portrayal of it as like a thing than or maybe even less that like maybe I'm not even interested in like the way that it's portrayed. Like I just kind of don't care. Like
No, that's super interesting because it's like you said, you ought to be able to relate what he's going through because on paper his circumstances are kind of similar to yours, where he's fresh out of school, he's looking for a job, etc., etc. Or he has a job, but it's not one that he wants. It's not a career. And yet there's a disconnect between you and this character, and maybe part of that has to do with the storytelling, but something about the way that this character is presented, or I don't know. I also like thinking back on that time in my life. I also felt a bit of a disconnect. Like some of it resonated with me, where I was like, yeah, that I felt that, but then most of it, I was like, I'm not really on the same wavelength as this dude.
Yeah.
And I felt like the parts where I actually resonated with him were like probably the darker parts of his musings or whatever, versus like his overall, I don't know, sense of how he is in the situation. I'm not even sure why the disconnect is there.
I think I just have like a vague repulsion to like this. I have a vague repulsion to the like disillusioned early 20s male psyche. I think that's what it is. Like I just don't feel.
What do you mean?
I just don't feel any connection to that whatsoever.
You are a jaded young 20-something.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, I'm jaded and I'm young. And it's like all that kind of stuff is true. But at the same time, it's just kind of like I also when I see Sing For Me Yesterday, I see it resonating with a lot of people that I like. Oh, how do I put this nicely? This is like
oh no.
This is like 1 or 2 steps away from being incel bait. You know what I mean?
Oh, I kind of was, yeah. So I know what you mean in that like it felt a bit like when I don't even know how to put this into words, but basically it feels like we're approaching like a really dark turn for this dude. And I think that's one of the reasons for the disconnect is because maybe neither you nor I have been driven to that point, or maybe we just don't have that capability in our personality to be driven to that point of like being incel whatever,
Right. I think that's probably honestly what it is. Like the fact that it's like the sort of proximity to incel ideology is like really putting me off. I think in a lot of ways it's because it's a piece of media that says like this is a man, he is disillusioned with society, and nothing in his life is going right for him. Like he gets to subsist, but that's not really much of like a life really. And he has a couple of like small things he enjoys every day. But on the whole, he's like pretty unhappy. And to me, when I see that, I'm like, I mean, fair, right? Like a lot of people feel that way, and that's a very like valid way to feel about a certain thing. But at the same time, it's almost like it comes coupled with this expectation that they deserve something, like they deserve something
I think
better.
That's what it is
right?
is that there's a bit of privilege that you kind of sense from this dude. in his anger towards the rest of the world.
Right. Well,
And
you're completely right, because it is
Yeah.
the indignity of being promised
Yeah.
something and not
Yeah.
receiving it.
like
Which is
I
yeah.
understand what they might be going for in terms of your expectations are set at a certain level when you're young, you know, and people are like, you can be anything.
Right, you
And
can be
then
an
when you
astronaut.
graduate school, you're like, you can be nothing.
Yeah, more than likely, you will become nothing.
Yeah.
Society
And
doesn't
so-
value you.
Right. And but the way that it presents itself in this character doesn't feel like that. It feels more like
There. Okay.
it feels like he just puts the blame outside, but then he also, when he puts the blame on himself, it's purely to put himself down.
Yeah. It is very much a like defeatist, like kind of doomer mentality, where it's just like,
Yeah.
well, the world sucks. I guess there's nothing I can do about it. They said I would have a
Right, yeah.
job, but I don't really care about that. And it's like,
Right.
like, come on, you know.
Yeah.
You know, it's not like I'm not saying like, okay, well, all people in that situation should just pull themselves up by their bootstraps, right? It's very much a different case of just like that versus like, obviously you are a privileged person who has been promised something and then you have been sorely let down by society. Society has let these people down, and that's something that, you know, we have to acknowledge for a lot of people who fall into these kind of mindsets. But at the same time, it's just kind of like, maybe that's not the kind of story that I want, you know, personally.
Yeah, I
right?
mean, at the same time, I think, like, for me personally, I'm okay with that kind of commentary on society because it's true.
I mean,
But
yeah.
also, it doesn't feel like this is the right way to tell that kind of commentary in a way that's very palatable, because it focuses very much on, like you said, his very defeatist mentality versus focusing on like on the overall message against society. Like the fact that he's going to maybe potentially look towards this pixie dream
Right.
girl to solve his problems, like that's big problem. 'Cause
Right. Okay.
She's a high schooler.
She is a dropout high schooler,
Yeah.
and you're a college student.
And
You're a person
I'm
who
not
graduated. You're like 25.
Right, exactly. And maybe the conflict that they're trying to show through very overt means is, you know, you can regress to when you were a child and feel comfort in that sense. You know, he could go back to like basically being a high schooler in his head, or he can try and go after like the girl that's actually his age, even though she turned him down because of his, you know, he's not in the right place to basically be dating anyone right now.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So yeah, I think it's very much like, it feels like he's going to try and reach for these outside influences to improve himself, but really the solution is that he improves himself on his own strength, you know, all that bullcrap.
I mean,
and maybe it'll lead that way, but I don't know.
There's just a lot of it that's like, I think it's fascinating that it does kind of lay bare the idea that at the base of a lot of Japanese kind of like isolated man society, it's, you know, a desire to embody and return to a time when things were okay and safe. And like, this is something we've touched on before, definitely in the podcast. I know I've talked about this. The appeal of high school anime in a lot of ways is about getting that feeling back, about that feeling of youth,
Right,
which is
exactly
something that Japanese society puts a lot of focus on. Because like, I don't want to solely put the blame on this on Japanese society, right? Because, you know, Japanese society is just a reflection of a hyper-capitalist society. And in really, like, this is a narrative you see all the fucking time anyway, right? Like, how many TV shows on American television have you watched that's just like, oh, I'm a man and I'm like listless and man, my life sucks, bruh. It's you know, like,
yeah, he's normal dude whose life sucks.
In a lot of ways, I felt like this when I was watching Aziz Ansari's Master of None. But like, yeah, I feel like those kinds of shows capture the same feeling of like, what does it mean to be like a young disillusioned person and to have to feel that like your life was kind of an infinite potential that has been sort of squandered, that you personally squandered it, when in reality like your options were always limited by your environment, right? It's like there's a metaphor that comes up in Master of None that's like, you know, your life is like a tree, and there's like fruit on the tree, and like there's so many like great looking fruits, and as soon as you start reaching for one, all of the other ones start to like rot away, and you just kind of like wonder about all the other ones. And it's like, personally to me, I just don't really care about that, right? Like that has, to me personally, never been anything compelling to me. Like the idea of like, well, you should have like reached for the stars when you were a youth. What's the worst that could happen? Well, there's so many bad things that could have happened, right? Like, it is this kind of complete privileged misunderstanding of how life works that I just kind of don't agree with. And that's kind of what Sing Yesterday for me feels like, where it's like, you know, I like squandered all my opportunities, and you know, I never got to do what I wanted to do. My youth is gone and fleeting and terrible. It's like, I just like don't really care. Like, this is why I love stuff like the Tatami Galaxy, because it approaches that from the exact opposite end of the spectrum. It's just like, well, this is all of the possible ways your life could have gone in college, and ultimately they all end up at the same place, really. And the only thing you're getting is a more nuanced understanding of how it got to that place. So, I mean, as far as like young man disillusioned with society, I just watched Tatami Galaxy, honestly. Like, you'll get the same feelings, and you don't have to watch someone be angsty for like 8 years and like try to fuck a high school girl. Like, come on.
Oh, God.
Come on. Like, I hate this. I hate this so much. If you're trying to get a woman to solve all your problems, we're having issues that are deeper than your loneliness. Like, it really is as simple as that.
Yeah.
Like, I should put this disclaimer out there. I'm not saying you shouldn't have people help you in your life, right? Because I think that helping people is great, and I think that it's important for people to have relationships, and it's important for people to like foster healthy relationships so that they may help each other in times of need. But you should not pin all of your personal development on a singular person, which is something that so many anime characters do, to such terrible, terrible, terrible result.
I mean, that's what people in real life do, and it's never
and it's
good.
terrible. It sucks.
Yeah.
Like,
so they shouldn't have it work out well. I don't know how this anime is going to work. I mean, the manga is complete, so I don't know how it'll end. But yeah, don't do that.
it's like right adjacent to like student teacher relationship like themes. It's like we really just don't have to talk about this, because like, why are we talking about this? You know, it's like
the symbolism,
right? It's like, okay, the inherent human struggle of trying to recapture your youth and beauty by youth and beauty by youth and beauty. Yeah, that's it. To try to recapture your youth by manipulating another person. Like, we don't necessarily need stories about that. We, one, have, frankly speaking, enough, and two, it happens in real life to the frequency that like we shouldn't need fictional stories about it. You know?
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's all I have to really say about
that
this.
that is my rant about Sing Yesterday for me.
There you go.
If you like this series, Godspeed. Like, that is your sort of taste, and I mean, I'm not going to begrave you for that.
Clearly, it was popular back then, and only ended like 5 years ago. So.
Yeah. It is not my cup of tea for many reasons that I've just stated.
Yeah, it's not really mine either, but that's okay.
Yep. Kind of just done with disillusioned dudes. I think like dude disillusionment is like not that interesting anymore. Like, we have had quite a lot of it at this point.
Yeah.
We're well full up on it.
I think that's what it is
right?
There's a bit of an oversaturation.
And this is talking about the Villainess thing, but like, I was reading a manga recently, which was about it was actually a Korean webtoon about a one of these isekai like reincarnated as a villainous setups. And she's just like, fuck it, I'm gonna do whatever the fuck I want. I'm gonna fuck shit up.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the kind of disillusionment I'm here for. I'm here for angry disillusionment. I'm here for disillusionment that leads to like things happening, right? Like maybe that's my like base kind of gripe with Sing Yesterday for me. It's disillusionment to the point of listlessness. Nothing happens. That's the point.
No, I completely agree. Yeah.
And I get it. Like I get it. That's how depression is like, right? Like you sit there for an entire afternoon and you watch as the sun goes by. You don't even turn the lights on. You just lie in bed and you're like, I get it. But we kind of have a lot of those stories now. Give me angry disillusionment. Just don't write it into incel territory. Don't be like, all women have wronged me. They are all incorrect. That's too far. Take it back. Take it back. Reel it back.
Yeah, you're like, yeah, angry disillusionment. Oh wait.
Listen, you want to cover your bases. All right, let's talk about my next life as a villainess. All routes lead to doom, or Hamefura for short. I don't remember the entire. It's like Hametsu flag.
It's long.
Yeah. This is one of many villainous isekais, which is, and I suppose we should finally explain this. In otome games, which are romance visual novels primarily aimed towards women as a demographic, it is essentially a dating novel game where you are a lady and you date a lot of hot men. Maybe one at a time, maybe all at once. It's up to you. And in these, there is a quite popular trope, a number of, I'm going to say decades ago at this point. I don't know how many of these things come out with like this setup really anymore. The villainous isekai thing might have ruined it forever. But the setup is that there is a character that is inevitably betrothed to a powerful figure, because you're going to fantasy magic school, but the European nobility still exists as a thing, except it's like the Japanese idea of the European nobility. It's a whole thing. But you have a powerful lady who is betrothed and madly in love with one of the princes, definitely, who are capture targets. You're allowed to romance them. And inevitably, when you do that, that character will be like, hey, that's not cool, and harass you, right? It's like a harassment, bullying thing. It's a very common thing in otome games, because it's like, it's the bread and butter, really, It's like having goblins in a fantasy story. And basically, it always comes down to a confrontation at a big sort of party celebration event where you denounce the villainess for all her sins, whether they be, crimes or not, and she either gets executed on the spot, which is fucking wild. She gets exiled. She gets jailed and then executed later. And then more or less her family also falls to ruin. That's the kind of setup we're talking about. Except in these otome isekais, the person who is getting isekai'd or reincarnated in another world is inhabiting the body of the villainess. So the character who kind of treats other people very harshly, has a very haughty attitude, very oh ho ho, like very like what are you doing, peasant sort of vibe. And the navigation is, how do I avoid getting exiled and or executed and or killed randomly, right? Because the setup is always that all the flags, right, lead to destruction.
Yeah.
And Hamefura takes a very interesting approach to it. I think this is one of the like things that really popularized the genre. It's quite popular. Like, obviously, it's one of the first ones to be animated into an anime, which is fair.
Yeah.
Because what she's gonna do is she's just gonna dismantle the flags one by one by treating people just very nicely.
It's okay, the way that this anime presents itself is very typical of an otome, and yet when you're first watching the first episode, you kind of, at least for me, I wasn't very sure whether I would end up liking the story. I was like, okay, I guess I kind of get the setup, like, animation's okay, like, I don't know, and then as the story develops, you get this precious, wholesome interaction between her and her new stepbrother, or I guess adopted brother. And then everything after that is just her being extremely wholesome to everyone.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
To the point that you get a very strong sense that everyone, man, woman, like all these people that she's interacting with, they're all falling in love with her.
Yep.
It's the most amusing and best thing about this anime, and I'm actually here for it. Like I look forward to this anime every week because it's so funny and really, really like heartfelt and very. I don't know. I just.
It's a very fun kind of romp through the genre in like a playful parody sort of way.
Exactly, and it's nice that the main character, she's very, outgoing, very outspoken, but she's also very much like a flawed human being, to the point that her flaws are made fun of throughout the show in a in a nice way, right? Like she is horrible with magic in this world. And so the way that she manages to use her magic ends up being pretty funny, because all she can do is like make a tiny little bump of earth.
Yeah, and then she just uses it to trip people.
Yeah. Or she's very, very unladylike in the way that she tried to approach her death flag avoidance. And so her mom gets on her case all the time.
Right, because it's like, how dare you? You're a noble lady. Stop farming.
Yeah, stop farming.
I will say that Hamefura is very popular for a reason. It's very lighthearted. It is very funny. It's actually just really funny.
Yeah.
It's really heartfelt too, is the thing.
Yeah.
And
like, yeah.
I think one of the most interesting things that it does is indicative of quite a lot of the genre, but it's amusing to me because it's like quite a lot of the genre is occupied by people who are like, okay, what I'm gonna do is I'm just gonna be really nice to people. So like, one, it differs from standard isekai because the person getting reincarnated is not the main character, right? Or is not the main character of the thing that they're reincarnating into. Two,
right.
They have knowledge of what they're reincarnating into. They have knowledge of future events. And all they're trying to do is avoid them. Three, they're reincarnating into a person that already exists in a world, right?
Yeah.
So what they're doing is they're and some grapple with this more than others, but like they're essentially either becoming a person that exists in the world, or they're kind of having to occupy that space in the world, right? They're like, okay, I'm suddenly Katarina and I have to be Katarina.
Yeah.
And for the problem solving is so different, like the style of problem solving is so different, because here's the thing about isekai, right? A lot of isekai removes the element of danger to the main character by giving him cheat skills, by giving him immense power.
Yeah,
right?
Yeah.
But what you're doing there, and this is something that is like kind of comes up in game design a lot, which is the tools that you are given to interact with the world affect how you see that world. If you have a hammer, everything out there is a nail, right?
Yeah.
And so that's like kind of this like approach where in a normal isekai, the way you solve problems is with an overwhelming show of power, right?
Yeah.
And I think for shows that like think about that and deal with it, I think it's interesting. Like Re:Zero, where the character has a lack of power entirely. Overlord, where the power and control is the point. That kind of stuff. But all in all, like, problems are solved by doing violence better. And then in isekai, like villainous isekai, there are essentially 2 or 3 problem solving tools, which is one, having knowledge of future events, right? You know what's going to come and you're trying to negotiate around that. 2, empathy. Like, if you just treat people not like garbage, maybe they won't exile you. That's a funny thought. And then and then 3, which is politics. Like, weirdly, villainous isekai has some of them are really detailed about like the court politics, and that is displayed as or that is kind of like viewed as a way to solve problems, and that's kind of fascinating to me. Yeah. I have a lot more thoughts about villainous isekai. If I went on, we would be here for 2 hours. So I'm gonna try to keep it as short as possible. I really like Kamifura. The animation is solidly okay, right? It's nothing special.
It's okay,
Looks
but
fine.
it's as okay as it needs to be.
Yeah, it's not the point of the show. It's mostly just watch a bunch of characters being cute with each other.
It's so charming.
It is
I
very
love
charming.
this show.
It's very heartfelt.
Yeah.
And there is something interesting to me about villainous isekai that I will touch on before we move on, which is that villainous isekai to me fills a similar but vaguely different and kind of historically relevant niche, which is isekai exist oftentimes to give interiority to a world that otherwise does not have any. Or is assumed to not have any. That's kind of the colonial model, right? It's like, okay, these people here don't think about anything, or they don't have like knowledge of what it means to be, or whatever. We've been over this. And so a lot of times it's like, I want to go to this Dragon Quest like world, except I want the NPCs to like, I want to interact with the NPCs, quote unquote, like they're real people. Like I want them to respond to me in a way that's like talking to a real person. I have some thoughts about that. Gonna put a pin in it. But the thing about villainous isekai is it gives a different side of a story that we already know. And it is assuming that we kind of know the touchstone of otome games, which, it's marketed towards people that would, right? And even if they don't, you get it, right? It's not that hard to understand. And it essentially shows the side of a character who is otherwise unsympathizable, right? Yeah. And I think that's really interesting because it, to me, is a lot like the thing that people do with fan fiction, which is write interiority to characters that otherwise don't get, do justice by the canon.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So if you're like, well, I really care about this one character who doesn't get a lot of screen time, who is just like a villain, I will write a 50,000 word fan fiction about them and their life and how they interact with certain people in certain ways, right? That kind of interiority is really important to fan culture, which is, at least in the West, a traditionally female-coded thing. It's not necessarily the case in Japan because doujinshi is such a big thing over there, which is enjoyed by people all across the spectrum. But there is something to the idea of why this is so compelling, which is, and this is something I personally really love, right? I love whenever a story is like, we will show you the perspective of a character in a piece of media that normally you don't get to see the side of. I love media from the point of view of like side characters, of like spurned villain characters. I love that kind of stuff. That's why I love Overlord, right? That's I read an anthology years ago. I cannot remember what it's called for the life of me, and I'm so upset that I don't remember what it's called. It was an anthology of shoujo short stories about the girl who is, I mean, kind of like the Villainess, right? Like the obstruction character in a shoujo manga who's like, hey, you can't have X handsome boy. I loved him first, right?
Yeah.
It shows it from that perspective, or the perspective of the person who is being broken up with so that the guy can get with someone else, right?
Yeah.
And I think that kind of stuff is, I mean, I love that stuff, right? Like, I love stories from that kind of perspective. And that's why I think I resonated so hard with villainous isekai, is I'm really interested in giving interiority and justice and a perspective to characters we otherwise don't get to sympathize with. So I think that's really cool.
Yeah. I'm generally on board with that kind of stuff too. Like, I remember the bit from Gekkan Shoujo Nozaki-kun where they have the the best friend.
Exactly. That is exactly it.
Oh my god, I'm here. I'm here for this.
Yeah, I mean that's what I'm talking about. Like that kind of fan
Yeah,
culture is
exactly.
really present in villainous isekai, even more so than it is in normal isekai. Because normal
Yeah.
isekai is just like, I want to inhabit fantasy world. What it would be like if you lived in a fantasy world? Villainous isekai is
Right.
like what does it mean to have a relationship with people? And you're like, oh, okay, all right. Um, I will link like 2 or 3 villainous isekai manga in the link dump. So feel free to check them out if you're interested in that. I would love to do an entire episode about this.
I guess I have some reading to do.
I'll send you some stuff. Don't worry about it. Don't worry about it. But yeah. This is good. I mean, the anime is good.
Yeah.
The manga is good. Like, very well worth watching.
I'm having to hold myself back from reading ahead.
Well, it's too late for me because I read ahead before we were.
Yeah,
even
you already
watching the
know.
anime.
But I think when the anime finishes, I'll probably just zoom ahead in the manga. But
Very good.
for now, I'm holding back so that the anime can stay fresh for me.
Yep. Fair enough.
Yeah.
Okay. Let's move on to the next thing, which is BNA Brand New Animal, which is the new Trigger show.
Yeah.
My God.
Needless to say, it's gorgeous.
Holy shit.
Your eyeballs will fall out your dang skull from looking at the color palettes from the first episode because they're really, really gorgeous. And then you get into the story and you're like, oh, this is charming.
This really might be the prettiest thing that Trigger has put out series-wise. Probably period, honestly. I would just say, like, it's probably the prettiest thing they've put out.
I think yeah, you know what? I would be inclined to agree with that. Because despite how pretty stuff like, Kill la Kill and Little Witch Academia and all of their, really well-known series are, this one really takes the cake in the visuals. Like they went above and beyond.
Right. There is a very grounded sense of how do I say this? Like BNA is vastly different to a lot of what Trigger has put out.
Yes.
And it's definitely over the top. Like there's, my God, like watch the baseball episode. Like Jesus.
Oh my God, the baseball episode is brilliant.
It's really over the top in the way that Trigger does. Like they love to have fun with their series. But it's a very different vibe than Kill la Kill or Little Witch Academia, which are like really, really, really bright and like movement focused. There is a very grounded sense to BNA. And it might be because of the setting and the story and how that plays. It might be because of the very deliberate choices they've made with the color palettes for a lot of the scenes. A lot of them are kind of non-standard color palettes, which are very, very pleasing to look at. You get a lot of night shots. You get a lot of like sunset, sunrise shots. It is a gorgeous, gorgeous anime, and it is. I think the director is Yo Yoshinari, who is like the guy who makes all the stuff that moves really fluidly, like the Little Witch Academia, like Sakuga shots or whatever. But this, as far as like is there a studio, aside from like UFO Table, that really puts out stuff that is like as consistently eye gorgingly beautiful to watch from a pure animation standpoint as Studio Trigger? Because I don't think so.
I would argue KyoAni, but that's because they're a completely different style.
Right.
Like the level of quality is like they're right on par with each other, but the styles are so completely different that it's hard to compare them.
You're right. KyoAni is like the sort of beautiful, super elegant like painting.
Yeah, exactly.
Right. It's like a painting in motion. It's like watching a film.
Yes. Right, exactly.
Whereas BNA and other stuff that Trigger makes is, it is action incarnate, right?
Yeah, it's bombastic, it's in your face.
They're so willing to twist and play with the forms that it is.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah. Honestly, like Studio Trigger's fucking knocking it out of the park. Like
I'm
it's
really,
so
really
good.
happy for them.
Yeah. Yeah, but even beyond that, like the ending sequence is, and I learned this the other day, because Studio Trigger did a Twitch live stream where they were essentially running a Q&A panel type thing with their concept artist, who I learned is from the West Coast. I'll link her Twitter, and it's fascinating because it feels like a lot of the sensibilities of it do, and this is actually pretty consistent for like Trigger Gainax, which is that Trigger Gainax is one of the studios that has like by far the most willingness to be influenced by other forms of animation, like stuff like Panty and Stalking and stuff like BNA take so much from Western animation.
Yes.
Like they're just very willing to like pick and choose what they like and like incorporate it into their own work. And very few other studios are really willing to do that, which I think is interesting. BNA looks so good. It looks so good in motion. It is a joy to watch. Like, if you watch it for nothing but the animation, it will have been worth it. Even though there's so much more to it. Because a lot of times, and this is a complaint we've had about Trigger in the past, which is sometimes they put out a show, and it looks great, it looks awesome, but there's just not a lot of substance to it. Whereas BNA's primo. It's primo substance. I feel like
it definitely, they've been able to strike a balance between the story and the animation, which is great.
Yeah. So it is about a girl who is cursed to become a quote-unquote beast person, so like a furry. And then she has to go live in the furry town where all the furries live because humans don't like furries. And it is interesting to me because that is a story that could easily have been not amazing, given Japan's track record with stories like that.
Yeah.
But it's actually really good. And it says some shockingly insightful things about discrimination, and not in the way that's like, oh, it's bad to discriminate against people. You shouldn't treat people differently just because they look different or they have like, you know, a different race or whatever. There is some legitimate nuance to the way that the discrimination is handled in BNA that has really been impressive to me. Like that, there's an episode, I think it's episode like 3 or 4, where she goes and sneaks out back to back to Tokyo with Nina, who is like the like dolphin girl. And when they go to this party and they discover that she's like a dolphin person, they're like, wow, it's so brave that you're here with us. It's so great that you're willing to be here. And like, meanwhile, they're at a costume party where they're supposed to be dressed like quote unquote beast men, right?
Yeah.
So like, one, woof, like holy shit, all right, this setup already. And then 2, you become so increasingly uncomfortable because they're just like, you're so brave for being a beast man.
Something is off immediately, yeah.
And then they're like, well, just keep you in a tank of water. There's no air there, even though, 1, I feel like people should know how dolphins work, but 2, you know, it's just like, but she loves the water. She's a beast person, like, you know, and it's like, well, it's obviously hurting her. What the fuck are you doing? And my God, I was like, oh, I've like been in this situation.
Right. The amount of loaded social commentary that they were able to pack in that one episode was amazing.
And it's like, it's not just like, oh, you shouldn't discriminate against people. It's like, it actually shows the nature of that discrimination. It says like, people will not openly treat you in a hostile way, but they can still be shitty towards you despite that.
Yeah.
Right? They can be patronizing. They can be misunderstanding. They can refuse to listen to you because they assume that they know more about you than you do.
Yes.
Because of the way you look or because of your background, right? And it's like, okay, Trigger. So we've moved on from...
I wasn't ready for this.
We've moved on from Promare, which is about the kind of social systems that bring rise to eco-fascism. And now we're here talking about tokenism. All right. Okay. I don't know what happened to Studio Trigger, but I am so on board with it.
I don't know, man. They're having a renaissance.
Yeah, they're putting out some of their best work right now, and it's
Yes.
kind of incredible to see. Like, BNA has so much substance to it. And here's the thing, which is, I think about this a lot, where there is a quote from some of the people who are working on Zootopia when that movie was coming out, where they were like,
Yeah.
you know, we initially had this like setup where like the carnivores had to wear like shock collars, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And we realized that we don't want to live in that world. Like, we didn't want to live
Yeah.
in that world. And to me, that was kind of like a slap in the face, really. Like, I understand why you wouldn't want to put shock collars in a movie
Yeah.
for children, but like,
Yeah.
when you say, I don't want to live in that world, too fucking bad, we already do! Right? Like...
There's an interesting contradiction between the fact that they're trying to show something that is very real to life in terms of like the metaphor, the parallel, whatever, about discrimination in real life versus how it is in this movie, and they're trying to show like a softer, more palatable version of it.
Right.
But at the same time, it's like, but are you taking away from the message by doing that? Like, yes, it has to be marketable towards kids, but still, are you affecting the message by how you're trying to treat it towards kids?
Right. And
yeah,
I think that's the kind of thing that BNA just like doesn't care about, to its benefit, really. Like,
I mean, a kid could watch that episode with the dolphin girl, and it would be fine. At least from what I remember, I don't think there was really much anything graphic about it.
No, of course not.
Yeah, and so there's ways of showing that kind of conflict to children if you're just very smart about it and you're very aware of what you're portraying. And yeah, I think Trigger definitely, at least with that episode, and we've only watched like half the anime, but from what we've seen, have hit it home. I wanna say arguably better than Zootopia did in terms
definitely.
of the discrimination
definitely.
topic.
Mhm.
Yeah, I mean, you can argue about the animation, whatever, and the quality of the story. Like, they're both great works.
What
But in terms of that specific nuanced discrimination topic, like they really got it.
what I will say is that I think children tend to be more receptive and able to handle like darker things than people give them credit for. Obviously, we're not going to show them like, you know, super gore where like someone's arm gets torn off and like, you know, they like really zoom in on it and stuff, right? But like,
oh yeah, no, that makes it too graphic.
but
yeah,
I think kids are more receptive to like these ideas and are better at understanding and absorbing them than people give them credit for. All that being said, BNA is just it's handling it very well, and it's doing it in a way that doesn't really compromise the like the nature of like. Here's the thing, which is that like the kind of like base problem I have is like with that kind of like Zootopia statement of like, oh, I wouldn't want to live in this world. It's I kind of do want to live in the BNA world. Well, one, because it's mostly just our world reflected, but it's like really charming and it's fleshed out in a way that's very, very satisfying, where you have all of this kind of stuff going on, and the cities feel so layered and complex and nuanced, which is not something that necessarily exists in a lot of other Trigger works. Even like Kill la Kill doesn't really have that sense. It's very like it's very like two-dimensional, I would say. Like like there's a hierarchy to the way the city is laid out, but it doesn't. There's no real like it's not about that, I guess, is what I want to say. But BNA is, and it's about the people who live there and the way that they kind of just like take every day. And in the first episode, she's getting hunted by people who are like really just willing to kill her, right? And
yeah,
and then later she's in Anima City and she realizes that like she still doesn't really like fit in here, right? Like she wasn't born a beast man, she was cursed to be one. And
right.
but to me that kind of exists as like a an interesting metaphor for like mixed race couples in societies that like don't necessarily
Interesting.
acknowledge
Yeah.
that, because especially in like I will say like somewhat in America, this is like a thing that happens, right? Where like you're suddenly becoming aware of like your status as a mixed race person. But this is especially true in Japan. Like this is so big in Japan. Like there's an entire term for people who are half Japanese and half something else, or like mixed race children in general, and they're called hafu, right? And it's not a very flattering term either. But like this idea that you're suddenly made aware of discrimination, but at the same time, because of your own experiences, you can't comfortably fit in either side, right? She doesn't necessarily fit in Anima City, where all the people just have different sensibilities. Like they have lived for the last 10 years in a different way than she has as a human, and she doesn't really understand to begin with. I think as it goes, they begin to understand each other more. But like this idea of like her mentality is so at odds with Shiro's mentality. Shiro's mentality is like all humans bad, right? It's like it's understandable why you would feel that way, right? And hers is like, well, I was a human once, and I'm a beastman. I don't still quite understand the beastmen and like what the culture is like here. Because she's like, well, why don't we just like stay in our beast forms all the time, and that kind of stuff, right? It's like, it's just like it understands and is willing to tackle these complex issues in a way that isn't reductive, which I think is really interesting. Like there's a lot of nuance to it. Yeah, very charming. And I will say that the opening ending, god tier. The ending is so good. The ending is directed by the Genice, who is the concept artist, and it looks very good. It looks a lot like the kind of like cutout, like paper cutout animation that was popular in like, I want to say like late 2000s, early 2010s Western animation. It looks very good. It's so, oh, you know what? Yeah, it's like, it looks like stuff like Samurai Jack, right? Like that cutout stuff. But the color palettes on it are gorgeous, and the song is so good. And I don't know, just watch the opening and ending, and like, just bask in that for a little bit. Like, they're so good. They're just so unequivocally good. Okay. Let's talk about the next thing.
So the next thing is Kakushigoto, or Secret Things. And it's essentially Sayonara Zetsubo Sensei.
Yeah. Yep.
I mean, but it I think in a slightly more lighthearted tone. Obviously, it's about a father who draws a very, I guess, like ecchi, or I don't know how to.
It's like it's like he draws Gintama, right?
Yeah, but even more, I think, even more focused on like the dick jokes and all that.
Yes, Gintama with more dick jokes.
Yeah, and he's trying to hide this fact from his daughter, who is steadily getting older and, is able to read and all that, and he really is mortified at the fact that she may one day find out that he authored something like this. So that's basically the running gag situation that prevails throughout this series. And it's interesting. It's pretty charming in its own way. I think the humor is pretty cute, all the different convoluted ways in which he tries to avoid his daughter finding out about his work. There was the one character that was voiced by the same voice actor who does Hisoka and those characters, who like was made the butt of a joke, and he's, I guess, they're kind of like the mama-san of costume shop, and then the kids see this character and then they treat the character like a monster, and it's just like, I don't know about that part, but that's also not the main focus of the work, so I don't know if it's really worth mentioning, but yeah, I don't know.
I don't know. It is definitely like an off-putting aspect of it.
Yeah.
You just kind of hope for better.
Yeah, right.
No,
exactly. You hope that they won't
I
do that.
generally agree. It feels a lot like Sayonara Zetsubo Sensei, but a little lighter. You know, it's
Yeah.
about a father-daughter relationship. It's pretty cute. It's relatively, all right. If you kind of like that sort of thing, I think I almost prefer the like darker tone of Sayonara Zetsubo Sensei. I think it just fits the like dissonance a little better. Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah.
I think it's cute.
It's definitely a different direction for this author, but I don't think it's bad.
Like I would say it's like worth taking a look at.
Right. Yeah.
Watching an episode of maybe like, it's generally kind of funny. I would say.
Right.
Like generally vaguely funny.
Mhm.
Because it's about like a dad who's just like embarrassed about what he does and trying to look good for his daughter, which is there are worse setups out there.
No, I do enjoy the setup quite a bit. I do think it's adorable, and the way that they show their relationship is very wholesome. So I like that too.
Okay. Well, if we got nothing else to say about that, let's talk about Fugou Keiji Balance Unlimited. I don't understand what this show is.
What's wrong? What don't you understand?
I just don't understand.
Having done our Sherlock episode, this is very different to Holmesian mystery type shows. This, in spite of the fact that it brands itself as, it's a Keiji, it's about being a detective. It's not very focused on the mystery to me. It's very much focused on the action.
Yeah, the mystery is so secondary that I forget
Yeah.
that sometimes there is a mystery to be solved. Like, they're supposed to be
Exactly.
detectives.
Right, and that's what it feels like a lot of mystery shows are nowadays. They try to strike a balance between the mystery and the action. And what tends to happen is if you focus too much on the mystery, then people get bored, or they're like, oh no, I'm too stupid to think about this. I don't want to think about this anymore. They tune out. And the other side of it is that it's too actiony, and then you're like, well, I thought it was a mystery show. It's just an action show. This one is very much an action show.
Yeah.
And it very directly references a lot of properties that are very action focused, like James Bond and Batman.
Right. Imagine if you rolled James Bond, Iron Man, and a Batman into one character.
Iron Man as well.
And then you gave him like a sort of like asshole smarm shine, and then you sent him into this world. That's what it's like watching Fugou Keiji.
Yeah. That being said, it's very entertaining as a result, and it's well animated, and we're having a blast watching it. I feel bad that it's delayed. I think it's funny that people on Twitter will have to thirst a little longer to see him again.
Nothing in my brain can even begin to comprehend how people are horny for this guy. I don't get it. He's not... Okay, one, I know it's anime. I know it's subjective. He's not hot. Two, he is the epitome of somebody who uses money to solve all his problems.
Yeah.
Three,
at the end of every episode, they show how much money he spent to solve his problems.
he does not give a shit about anything or anyone. He just wants to be a detective, kind of, for some reason, I guess. Four, how are people horny for him? I don't understand it. Maybe this is the point at which sugar daddy culture has gone on for too long.
This is where we're at, yeah.
This is the logical conclusion. We need to shut it down.
This is Twitter sugar daddy culture.
I don't understand. I don't understand.
Well, that's because you're not part of that culture, Soupy. Therefore,
I guess not. Like
It's all right.
Whatever. Anyway,
So we'll resume the show whenever it picks back up, I guess.
yeah, it's currently on hiatus because of the pandemic.
Yeah.
Interestingly, this show is based on a novel by Yasutaka Tsutsui, who is a really famous Japanese novelist. He wrote the original novels for The Girl Who Leapt Through Time and Paprika.
Mm-hmm.
And also Fugou Keiji, obviously. So, like, that's like 3 different things that have been adapted into relatively well-regarded anime. Obviously, I would argue that Satoshi Kon's work on Paprika is what makes it so good. But I'm sure the original novel is pretty good, too. And it's interesting to me because I don't really get what the point of this show is other than to be a spectacle. And that's fine, right? It's perfectly fine if it's like just a nothing sort of popcorn show. But I don't really get why any other characters exist then except to be exasperated, right? And if that exasperation is necessary to the functioning of the narrative in any satisfying way. Like, obviously I get like, okay, this is probably the viewpoint character are sort of exhausted Watson kind of character is here because he was most likely the viewpoint character of the novel. But like what exactly are we getting out of Fugou Keiji as a narrative, and why, right? Like, he solves all his problems with money, and 2 episodes in, we've yet to see any indication that that's not how you solve problems. Like, the main character's like, hey, like, knock that shit off. Like, I work hard because I have, like, a strong sense of justice or whatever. But obviously it doesn't work! None of this shit works! You just throw money at the problem and it fixes everything! Like, he's got so much money!
Yeah, I think you're experiencing the frustration that our Watson character experienced.
But like, what exactly? I'm not sure what the point is. Is the point like, because it's fine if it's like a pure spectacle thing, but like, there's something to be read into about how or why this exists, and like, if by the end of the show, our millionaire detective is like, you know what? You're right, exasperated Watson. Maybe I can't solve all my problems with money. Maybe I can't just pay off everybody. It's like, cool. But like, the show tallies up how much money he spends at the end of every episode, like it's part of the show, right? Like it's supposed to be a cool kind of fun thing that they're doing.
Yeah.
So if the point of the show, if the point of the narrative is to say, you can't solve all your problems with money, it is doing a piss poor job.
You know, I'm very interested in seeing where they go with that and what their message is towards the end, because you kind of get the sense that obviously he and the Watson character are supposed to kind of learn from each other, where the Watson character has a very earnest way of approaching the cases that, you know, works around needing to have money versus, you know, money. And so the Watson character is also kind of like learning, like, well, not everything can be obtained, at least in a timely manner, through my old-fashioned ways. Like, I should open up to being, you know, I should just be more open-minded and that kind of stuff, if it means that I get to catch the bad guy.
Right.
But
yeah.
And so there's a certain tension there about like the ethicality about all of this and what is the quote unquote right way of solving these cases.
Who cares about
So
ethics when you have money?
I know. I feel like a lot of it is just spectacle, but I'm hoping that it will build towards something because of that tension. So, and there's also a lot that we don't know about, you know, the main guy's motives. Like, why does he want to be a detective? He hasn't explained as much, and so on and so forth. We just learned that he has a sister, so.
Yeah, fair.
I think there's a lot of stuff for us to hopefully learn and get out of the story. I'm crossing my fingers that it'll lead somewhere.
Yeah.
Somewhere that doesn't just involve quenching Twitter's thirst.
Like I don't really. Yeah, I don't know what else to say about it. Like, here's the thing. Like, on the Wikipedia page, it will tell you how much cost is incurred in each episode. In the first episode, it costs 1,369,800,000 yen, which is shoot, what's it? I'm so bad at math. It is.
It's about like $10 million ish.
I think
like, maybe like 20 million.
I think it's 100 million.
No,
No. 10. Yeah, 10.
Yeah.
10, like 13 million. About 13
Yeah.
million dollars.
Yeah.
Why? In the second episode, he incurs 83 billion yen.
But it's the title of the series.
$830 million dollars.
Is unlimited.
This is, you know what this is? This is like if you let Elon Musk be a detective. This is how he would solve all his problems. He would not pay his workers. He would cut their like wages. He would not give them overtime. No unions. All so that he could play detective, which to be fair, he kind of does already, mind you. But why? Like I just don't. It baffles me.
Yeah.
This baffles me. Like
Yeah.
he spends.
That's the real mystery in this show.
He spends an order of magnitude, almost two, like, more money. The fictional premise of this show is destroying me. I know I'm not usually one to, like, rattle on about, like, realism in shows, because, like, I think it's kind of trite, but, like, this offends me on a deep, visceral level. Whatever. I'm done. I'm done with Fugou Keiji. It's a fun watch, honestly.
It's fun, yeah.
It breaks my brain, but it's a fun watch. The animation is good. It's fun. I guess if you're into that kind of thing. They play like this like jazzy like Fugou Keiji kind of like theme song, which is also very interesting.
Let's talk about the music. Very briefly, it is off the charts in the first episode.
Oh my god,
they're doing such ordinary things, but the music is like, bah, 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 like it's like, what's the music is the most exciting thing in the show.
I don't know why, but you're right. The music is like weirdly like over the top.
Yeah,
like it's not only the music itself is over the top, like for the mundane things they're doing, but it's like they do things with it that like normal anime usually doesn't really bother with, which is kind of cool, right? Like they have this like kind of like crescendoing thing where they're switching between the two viewpoint characters of like the millionaire and the like our exasperated Watson, and it's just like it plays like a kind of like a quieter like calmer theme, and then it switches to the billionaire and it's just like bah, 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 bah. And sure, why not? Yeah, I mean it's interesting, but I don't understand who. I guess they're trying some stuff. Like, I guess they just had some money to burn, evidently. I don't know.
How about that?
Let's move on to the next couple things, because the next, like, 3 or 4 the next, like, couple of things, like, we can go over pretty quickly. Like, Appare-Ranman is a show about a person, a couple of people in a U.S. race. They have to drive across the United States. It's essentially the plot of part 7 of JoJo's Bizarre Adventure, but less interesting. The character designs are wild. It's like Street Fighter cranked up to 11, where you have like this like Mardi Gras voodoo doctor guy in one of these cars, and he just looks like a palm tree that was regurgitated on by a color palette. The main character looks like Ishikawa Goemon, the like Persona summon, but more anime. And it's all contrasted by the fact that like one of these characters is like this regular ass samurai dude, and he just looks like a normal human being. He's got thick eyebrows, but other than that, he's dressed in like a normal kimono, and like everyone else looks fucking nuts so wild. Don't.
Yeah, I'm not. I don't know either.
Oh, the show is boring, by the way.
Yeah, I kind of bounced off of the first episode.
It's super, super boring. There's like really nothing else to say about that. It's really just not worth watching.
If you want to watch, I guess, great racing animation, you can just watch Redline.
Just watch Redline. It's way more interesting and actually awesome.
Yeah.
And actually compelling.
Yeah.
Okay, next, Art, which is about a woman who wishes to be a noble lady who wishes to be a painter in like 16th century Florence. But nobody wants to let her do that because she's a noble lady. And then she's like, cool, I'm going to quit being a nobility and try to become an art apprentice. And nobody will take her except for Leonardo da Vinci-sama.
No, it's Leo. It's just
Leo. Leo-san. I don't know. I think it's surprisingly cute. Like it
is surprisingly cute.
The art style is cute. The
yeah
pace of it is quite. I wouldn't say slow. I would just say like I wouldn't say meandering either. Like a nice way to put that. It's like lilting. Like not a ton really happens, but like it's like a slice of life show really. So not a lot has to happen.
Right.
It has a pretty unique premise. I think it's interesting. But other than that, like, you know, that's kind of all it is, right? It's just like slice of life in 16th century Florence, which like it's like this close to being an isekai. Like it really is just this close.
Listen, we already got that out of Assassin's Creed, K.
Yeah, I mean that's true.
You already got our Leo up in there.
You know, I don't understand why this show exists, but I don't disdain it for existing. I think it's kind of cute.
No, I think it's fine. And it's based on a manga, which is also very cutely drawn, and
I like the art style a lot. It's like really simple and cute.
It is. Yeah, I like it a lot too. I think it's. If you watch the first episode and you're like, I'm down, then I imagine the rest of the show is paced similarly.
I think so. Yeah.
Yeah. It doesn't seem like the kind of show that would flip all your expectations, you know, unless it does, in which case, boy howdy, they would have to do a huge tonal shift.
Okay, well, next let's talk about Princess Connect Redive, which is, it's an anime based on a Cygames game, Princess Connect Redive, which is the sequel to Princess Connect, which was a mobile game that they ran for about a year before it kind of went under. Very interesting that they decided to reboot it, but this is a good anime.
This was a shockingly entertaining anime that when we first started watching it, I was like, this is a Soupy anime. And then as we continued watching it, I was like, oh, this is a me anime too.
I brought you on board.
They got me on board with their treatment of the protagonist. It's so funny.
Okay, yeah. So the main character of Princess Connect Redive, the like protagonist character, and I always think this is hilarious, which is how a game adaptation treats its main character.
Yes.
Because normally they tend to be quite bland. What they decided to do with Redive, and I do not know if this is the case in the game, right? But in the anime, they just treat him like he has amnesia, but they just say, okay, he has super amnesia. He doesn't know how to do anything. He barely knows how to talk. He has to be taught that money isn't food. He has to be taught that food is good and that you eat it. Like he's a good-hearted, charming main character in the way that he's a literal baby. He's a literal baby embodying the body of a teenager.
As avidly as we consume media, we have seen, you know, protagonists like this who have been portrayed in ways like in the Persona animations, where it's like they give him very few voice lines, but he has his own character, or he has or an amnesiac protagonist. Like that's also a huge thing in media. But I struggle to recall an example of where protagonist, like,
This is
a game protagonist is characterized in this way specifically.
Well,
a silent game protagonist.
like a silent game protagonist in the way that like it makes sense, right? Like for a character that has to be walked through a bunch of tutorials of how to interact with the world.
Yeah.
That is not that's not the worst way to handle it, actually. Shockingly.
I love it because they have such a sense of humor because they know what they're doing when they give you like a silent protagonist role in their games, right? They're giving you like a husk of a human being. Like there's no character inside of this husk. And so the fact that they made him baby and that's his character.
I legitimately do not know if that's what it's like in the game, but I suspect not quite. Not quite to this extent, at least. But I don't know. I've never played it, so
yeah.
I guess.
Oh my god.
There's some interesting stuff about Princess Connect. It has some like really wild kind of underpinning lore that I will not spoil at this time. I will likely do it at the end of the season. Because I bet they will reveal it by the end of the season. But weirdly, the setting is very compelling to me. But also the setup of it is quite compelling to me too, because it's like, all right, it's a bunch of characters, and they're gonna live in a fantasy world and eat monsters. Fuck, you got me on board. That's like, three things I love. Slice of life,
there's
monsters,
a slice of life
food?
aspect of it, yeah.
Adventure? Fantasy?
Yeah.
I love it.
And then overarching plot that you kind of get tidbits about.
Yeah. But honestly, like, this show is surprisingly funny. Like, it's shockingly funny for what it is. Like,
I thought it would, just based on the first episode, I thought it would just be like the repeat of the gag of like just him getting eaten by monsters. And then they kind of expand on it more and more as you realize like how many things can happen because this protagonist is baby.
Right. Every other character has to pick up the slack, and I think that's hilarious.
Yeah.
That's so funny to me.
It is funny.
This is and this is interesting because this is like I think it's produced by the like Cygames proprietary studio, which I'm sure they poached like animators from other studios, but like it looks really good in comparison to things like the Grand Blue Fantasy anime. It looks really, really good. Like it's very clean. The animation is great. They obviously like use a lot of computer effects, but I think they use them quite effectively.
Sure.
Like they definitely include like a couple of Sakuga shots per episode, and they're like definitely flexing for sure.
Yeah, for sure.
It looks really good, and it looks like they put a lot of care and attention into it, and that goes a long way in making something enjoyable to watch.
Yeah, it doesn't feel like your run-of-the-mill make this game into an anime kind of deal.
No,
like
it seems like they actually care.
And thought into it. Yeah.
Now, as for the Grand Blue Fantasy anime, that's
maybe they learned from their mistakes.
I suspect that they might have. Yeah. Honestly, like, shockingly, I would recommend this to like even people who don't really like the idea.
I would actually be inclined to agree. Like, even if you don't know the quote unquote lore behind it with the original game and games, at least, it's entertaining in its own. The context of the games just makes it more like ooh kind of deal. But
it's basically like
you don't need it.
Yeah, it's basically like it's like if Konosuba was not focused around all of its characters having like really kind of intense character flaws.
It is like a very toned down Konosuba. Like it's more wholesome.
It's a wholesome Konosuba. Yeah, that's it.
Yeah.
You're right. Cool.
Yeah.
Cool. Let's talk about listeners. Let's talk about listeners.
How much of this did we watch? Was it just one episode?
We watched one episode of
Oh my god, it
Listeners.
felt so long. Okay.
It felt like we watched 3 or 4.
Alright, so this the first episode, at least, I don't know how the rest of the anime goes. But the first episode feels like a lesson in concept versus storytelling.
Yes.
So the concept, art, and story, world building, all of that, very interesting. Character designs are fine. Like the art and animation itself is fine. All of that, like, you would expect, considering you add up all these things together, would make a pretty decent anime. But then the storytelling comes along. And storytelling is how you carry this wagon, this carriage of all this good stuff to its destination. And I don't know what they were thinking, putting all these nice things into some rickety wagon with the wheels falling off, but my god.
This show seems to be a lesson in directing. It is this is one of those things where you watch the first episode and it is a how to not do this. It is so poorly paced and so poorly directed that it is agony to watch. Like, legitimately agonizing. And because, you know, maybe I have some issues with the premise because I think it's a little bizarre, but it's unique, you know, and I'll give it credit for that.
Yes.
The world is very interesting. It seems to have, honestly, I'm a little like disappointed because the concept art for the show looks awesome. It looks amazing. It's very, very cool. But in the practice of putting it to animation, what they've done is they have essentially taken the first draft of a story, right? Like, if you wrote the first draft of a story with annotations where it's like, okay, like, this is what it is, and this happens, and this happens, and this happens, and you just don't edit it at all, that's what it feels like I'm watching. It feels like they took a script that was like very first rough draft, they turned it in, and they were like, okay, do this 1-to-1, and the director was like, sure, whatever, right? Like, there is an unimaginable amount of filler content in the first episode. It's so boring. Like, here's the thing. The first episode could have taken place in, you know, if we're being generous, could say 10 minutes, right? If I was gonna say, like, how much time should it have taken if it was a good anime, I would probably say like 5 or 6. Like,
Yeah.
Here's the way the first episode goes, right?
I'm ready.
I will lay it out for you, like, in a way that makes sense to me logically first, and then I will tell you how it actually is. So, here's the first episode, right? And this is the way that it actually does happen, right? It opens on the trash heap, like the junkyard that the main character works in, and he's like collecting stuff, and then he collects stuff, and then he finds something which happens to lead to him finding an unconscious girl who he takes home, and then they like have a conversation, they talk about some stuff, and it turns out that she is essentially an Eva pilot, right? That's just what it is. It's an Eva pilot, and he happens to be someone whose hobby is to build Evas or mechs.
But they're all music themed.
They're all music
Everything in the
themed.
world's
Like,
music themed.
that's the like premise of the show. And
Yeah.
then monsters attack, which is why they have the mechs in the first place. And
They're called the earless.
yeah, of course. And then they use the mech, defeat the earless, and then they're like, cool, I guess we'll skip town. That's the first episode. Now, I was being very, very generous with how I plotted that out. Because
Yeah,
if you follow that from point to point, you don't even really have to
Right.
start at the beginning. You can
Right.
start, I'm gonna say, like 60% at the earliest. Like, your story should not have 20 minutes of setup for 2 minutes of payoff.
Exactly. And like even the way that you summarized it is
It's a little long. It's a little gratuitous.
It's long. And like I understand like when you think about it point to point, like you're like, okay, well, first I have to establish the world, I have to establish these two meeting, I have to kind of fill in a bit of backstory because the girl has amnesia, she doesn't know why she's there, and so you have the guy kind of explain like what she is and why she's important to this world, and then they have the conflict where the earless attack, and then they fight off the earless together, and then they have that resolution at the end where they skip town together.
So
Like you would think that all of that would make for a packed episode. So why on earth does this episode feel like it is like an hour long?
And I'm not kidding you when I say this, but we had to check the time multiple times to make sure it was not a double feature episode and that we were accidentally in it for the long haul.
Yeah.
Okay. So I gave you the generous one. This is what it like really realistically should have been.
Yeah.
Boy finds girl. Boy learns girl is mech pilot. Earless attack. Fight. Leave. That's the way it should have gone. Obviously, that's not the way that it went.
And then they could have had the characterization where they learn about each other like afterward or something.
Right.
Like
here
that's fine.
Let me lay out for you what it looks like in the actual episode. Because this is and I'll give you the excruciating version. So like first we get this like establishing shot of our main character. He's like a little boy and he's like searching for junk. And he searches for junk for like 3 or 4 minutes. And like he's having a conversation with like other people. It's like, it's such a hard day out of labor, but this is what we gotta do to survive. And then eventually he finds this like little node. And he's like, that could sell for money. And he like tries to grab it. He falls into a hole and he finds the girl. And he's like, whoa, girl, that's wacko. That's weird. And then like he takes her home, and I swear to God, there are like 10 or 12 minutes in this like scene where it is this entire long drawn out sequence where they're in like his sister's bar, and they spend like 10 minutes establishing every little detail that you could ever want to know about the world. That's like, okay, well, you see,
by talking to each
other, and it's like just still shots of them looking at each other and talking. It's like the worst D&D lore dump I've ever seen in my life. It's like, and then the earless attacked. What? I don't know about that. I have amnesia. But you're a pilot. I'm a pilot. A what? You're a listener. I'm a what? You're a listener. You pilot a mech.
She's a player.
Yeah. And then they have an argument. And she, like, throws his, like, mech on the ground. And he's like, oh no, it's, like, broken. That was my dream. That was my favorite thing in the world. Why would you do that to me? You're so cruel. And then she runs away. And then eventually the earless attack, and he's like, no, I gotta find the girl, oh no. And he's like running with the thing. He's like, I hope it still works. I hope it still works. I hope it still works. Mm-hmm. And then he like falls into a hole, and he's like, oh, I guess I just remembered there is like a 60-second plus sequence where he's falling, and he's like, like it's 1 or 2 minutes. Which is, in anime time, so long. He's falling, and he's, like, crying. He's like, I, like, don't want to die. I didn't live that long of a life. I didn't get to do what I wanted to do. I'm, like, I'm so dead. Like, I really don't want to, what am I going to tell my sister? How will she feel? I didn't get to make up with that girl. I never got to see my and then eventually we move on from that agonizing sequence, and then the mech activates, and like the action scene is not that exciting because it's all CG and it doesn't look that good. And eventually it just,
I wish you were exaggerating, but you aren't, because I was there.
eventually,
watching
it just you reach the end of the episode, and he's like, "Get out of my town!" And they're like, "Cool, run away on the train."
Yeah,
And
so
and you just wonder why.
you wonder why, and you also think about like how other series have done these kinds of things better. Like you can kind of tell where the influences come from. Like it's a bit of Eureka 7. It's a bit the last shot where you see like the statue or whatever monument thing reminded me a bit of Fooly Cooly, like just
Right,
that
yeah.
kind of, that type of shot, you know? And so I was like, okay, but I feel like I would rather be watching either of those two shows.
Right, Listeners is like a horrific bastard child between Fooly Cooly and Eureka 7, and not in a good way. Like, it's like it took the worst parts of both of those shows and just mixed them into one disgusting, one disgusting, like, jungle juice concoction. It's like...
with music as the theme.
Yeah. Like, I was legitimately interested because, one, if you watch the trailer, it looks great because you don't have any of this, like, terrible dragging on.
Yeah.
And I'm fascinated by the idea of what it means to, like, what is it trying to say about music, that it's like no music exists in the world except that which is given to us by mech pilots or whatever,
right,
to defeat monsters. And it's like, I'm sure there's something there, but I'm just wondering if it's worth it to slog through what I had to witness to get through it. Do you know what I mean? Like, it's just
no.
why?
If they did us that dirty on the pilot, the first episode.
Yeah.
No way.
Yeah, that's about my feelings on it. Listeners is like highly disappointing. Maybe it gets better, but I personally am not gonna stick around to find out.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. That's our rant.
Holy shit. Oh my god, I'm exhausted. Let's talk more or less pretty briefly about the next couple things. So Wave, Listen to Me, or Nami yo Kite Kure is about a young woman who gets drunk one night and gets put on the radio, and she like goes on this entire huge rant about her love life and about men and how terrible they are, and it's hilarious, and of course it does very well. And then she becomes a radio person. This is I maybe read a couple of chapters of the manga for this. I don't remember a ton about it. But it is, I mean, this is great. Like, honestly, it's very,
the writing is super on point.
It's fun. It plays a lot with the idea of like radio voice, and radio entertainment, and that's especially amusing because they're already voice actors and they're voicing characters, but now they're voice actors playing characters who are voicing on the radio.
Yes.
So there's a couple layers. There's a lot of fun visual metaphors, like one where the setup is that she's currently fighting a bear, and then she like suplexes the bear, and it's very funny, right? It's not like a what's real, what's fake. It's literally just like, this is just a visual metaphor or a visualization of what's happening. And yeah, I don't know. It's really good. Like, I think this is already probably a pretty good manga. But it becomes a very different experience in anime where you actually get to hear the voices going on. And I think that's actually really good. I think it really suits being an anime. And I will say that it is a mature show, but not in like a sexual, graphic, or otherwise kind of way.
Yeah.
But it is a very like these are just It's a mature way in the same way that listening to your friends bitch about their lives, like when you're having like a night out drinking, is fun and mature.
Yeah,
right.
Exactly. Right. This is for people who have been through stuff or have heard their friends go through stuff, and you don't get the same kind of context if you haven't had life experiences.
It is intensely relatable for people above the age of, I'm gonna say 21.
Yeah, that's fair.
In the United States. Like, that's probably, like, I know people drink earlier, but like, like
Well, yeah, but you gotta experience life too.
Yeah, like you don't really get it until you're out of school.
Yeah.
But it's so good.
Yeah, no, it's wonderfully done.
It's very well put
The
together.
animation's great.
Yeah.
I have a slight disagreement with the way that they shade their eyes, and it drives me up the wall. And
Yeah, I see that. It's fair.
yeah, it's a very unique choice in the same way that one anime had that blur effect over their entire anime.
Yeah.
It's a unique choice that I personally disagree with.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not even evocative of the original manga
No,
art style
it's not.
from what
It's
I
not.
saw. Yeah, but yeah, no, it's very distracting and it's hard to get used to, but I'm sure I would get used to it for the sake of watching this anime because it's really entertaining.
Yeah,
to watch.
yeah. It's just raucously entertaining. You know, it's just some good old fashioned vent humor.
Yeah.
Okay. Next is Gal and Dinosaur. Or Gyaru and Dinosaur. So, for those of you that don't know what a gyaru is, it is a subculture in Japan that mainly focuses around very flashy fashion, and like I almost want to say gaudy garments and like accessories, and sometimes you get suntans or spray tans or whatever. That's like a kind of thing. It's like it's almost like being like a Jersey Shore kind of person.
Like very fashionista.
Yeah, yeah, it's that kind of vibe. Like gyarus are like popular like party people.
Mm-hmm.
Like that's the kind of like subculture that they fit in. But you know, it varies, and this is about a gal and a dinosaur. She just finds a dinosaur and is like, cool. I guess I live with a dinosaur now. And it's just kind of like this. It's a very odd series. Even the manga is like very very weird. Because it's like it just kind of plays it like really straight, and like that's where the humor kind of comes from. Where it's just like no one really like questions the fact that there's a dinosaur living in her house. They just kind of are like, wait, can dinosaurs eat ramen? The art style is very cute and simple. The anime for Gal and Dinosaur is very interesting. Because the manga is quite straightforward. It's just like a 4-panel like you know, like a Sunday morning cartoon sort of or a Sunday paper like comic strip. But the anime takes those bits and they kind of do whatever they feel like doing with them, which I think is very interesting. As far as an adaptation goes, it is one of the wildest adaptations of anything that I've seen in a long time. It is a lot of the humor of the original comes from the situational humor, of like just kind of a dinosaur attempting to live in a mundane world. And who knows if it's even really a dinosaur. But a lot of the humor in the anime is, and I think this is to its credit, quite visual. There's a lot of visual gags. Like there's portions that are animated in like what you would traditionally expect an anime to look like. You know, and then there's parts that are like claymation or like felt doll animation. Or filmed, or so like the weirdest thing by far was in the first episode, half of the episode is dedicated to recreating the first couple like strips or like sequences, but in real life, and the gal is replaced with like an old actor guy, and the dinosaur is like a person in a costume, and they just play it completely straight. There's no joke other than the fact that you're just watching this happen. It's very weird. It's very like Pop Team Epic, in terms of like how it looks, but it's very different in terms of how the comedy plays.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
It's very much about the absurdity of what you're witnessing.
It's a lot slower paced than the humor in Pop Team Epic. Like, Pop Team Epic is very, very bombastic and fast, and the jokes, like, they hit you and then they run, and then
I like Gallon Dinosaur because it's maybe the driest humor I've ever seen from
Yeah.
anything. It's so dry, it's ridiculous, and I kind of am in love with it.
I actually really like this show. It's very charming.
Yeah, it has a lot of charm to it. I'm very curious to see what they do in the further episode. We only watched one episode, so
Yeah.
And the thing is, though, like I kind of expected them to be short form, so it's very like an interesting decision to me that they decided to make it, you know, a full length kind of deal. And
Yeah,
I'm
we'll
very
see
curious.
whether that was a good choice, because I did feel like the first episode was pretty long, especially like the live action.
Well, live
part
action
of it.
was
I
really
like,
long
this
because
is
we
going
just
forever.
watched it in
Yeah.
animation.
Yeah,
So
it felt long.
it was just like one of those bits that you just like when does this bit stop?
Yeah, exactly. You keep thinking like, are they gonna keep going, and then they just keep going until it's finished, until they recreated everything, and then some.
Very odd.
Yeah.
But cool, actually. I think one of the coolest things to come out this season. And this season has a lot of really good stuff, actually. Kind of
It
like
does.
looking at it.
Yeah.
Obviously a shame that some of it is being delayed by this global pandemic.
Yeah.
Very trying times we live in, so it goes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
Touch briefly on Olympia Kyklos, which is similar in that it's entirely claymation. It's vaguely funny. It's a gag comedy, like, you know. It's a very straightforward, like, short form gag comedy about a person from ancient Greece that gets, I guess, teleported to like modern day Japan and has to function there.
I very much did not know what to think about this show.
I didn't really know either. Sometimes you see a show and you're like, I don't understand why this exists, but in like more of an existential sense than a like this is like has problematic content sense. It's just like
Right,
I
exactly.
do not understand the sequence of events that led to this person thinking that this was an interesting setup, but I'm here for it, I guess. I don't know. I'm not gonna watch more of it, but it's a gag comedy, so it's pretty like it's like popcorn content. Like, have a good time. Honestly, you know, it's like Sekho Boys. You're just like you're mainly there for the absurdity of what it is you're watching. It is the main character is like a Greek statue, and he's like animated entirely using clay, which is interesting. I like getting anime that's not traditionally animated. I think that's very cool.
Yeah.
Okay, talk to me about Woodpecker Detective.
All right. So I watched the first 3 episodes.
Sure.
And you've watched the first episode.
Yep.
So I might end up having to spoil like the first 3 episodes, but I don't
That is
think
no
you
problem.
care. Okay. So
I do not care.
the way that this show is set up, it feels very like, at least from the first episode and especially from the intro, which I only noticed afterward how much it is. All right. So from the very first episode, you establish this deep connection between this poet and his friend.
Yes, a definitely heterosexual and not gay relationship.
But the way that the intro presents itself, it's basically all dudes, bunch of dudes, and they're all in, you know, different outfits, and the way that they're drawn is very pretty, and then they have 2 dudes with matching earring studs, and I'm like, my freaking god. And so they spend the first episode basically establishing how close these the poet and his friend, like how close their friendship is, by how the friend basically sells all of his stuff away so that the poet can stay in town and pay his rent. And then the friend is, the poet is like, oh my gosh, for the rest of my life, I'll make sure no harm comes to you, kind of deal. And the very beginning of the episode starts with the friend saying, my best friend died. Like,
oh, that's right. I forgot.
Yeah, that's how the very beginning of the first episode starts, is the friend saying his poet friend died. And so, the second episode feels like someone watched the first episode and they were like, I don't want any of this homo business up in my business. You need to back the F up. And so they spend the episode with poet guy convincing his friend, who is very uncomfortable with this proposition, to go to a brothel in the red light district, yada yada yada.
Okay.
And he's very, very, very insistent on it. And the friend is so uncomfortable until the poet starts challenging his manliness about the whole deal and being like, and so then the friend gets like, you know, all up in arms, and he's like, okay, fine, I'll do it. And, you know, let's go. They go to the brothel. Friend is very, you know, he's like a professor type, you know, and so he is very proper. He doesn't know what to do. He has very little experience with women. And so the poet friend is kind of like laughing at him because he's been around, you know, with the ladies. And so he sets up his friend with this woman. They go off to their rooms, but the rooms are right next to each other, and so the poet is more interested in like kind of eavesdropping as best as he can into what his friend is doing with the other lady rather than spending time with the lady that he's with. The evening transpires. You hear the friend eventually storm out of the adjoining room. And then later you see that the woman that he was with is dead. And she on the floor, she is like bloody, like there's a knife in her throat. She dead. The police arrive, and there's a lot of witness testimony placing these two at the scene. And so the poet says, my friend was in that room with that woman. And immediately the friend is like, yo, what the F? What? I thought we were bros. And so then the friend claps back, and he's like, well, he's crying at this point because he's like, he got betrayed by his friend. He's like, I thought that, you know, we were friends, but, you know, and then he tells his side of the story where he was with this woman, and the woman, like it was really awkward. Like he wasn't able to, like, you know, kind of accept her advances basically. And so he kind of like pushes her away, and he apologizes for it, and she says something implicative about like how his poet friend isn't as good a guy as he thinks he is. And then the friend gets upset at her, and he's like, don't talk about him like that. And then he eventually storms out. The way that the poet friend tells his account to the police is that, you know, those two were in the room together. He heard a disagreement. He thinks that maybe his friend might have killed her out of like anger because she was insulting his manlyhood or whatever, because he couldn't like get it up with her, basically, is what he was implying. And so it's just this huge tonal shift between the first episode, which tried so hard to establish their friendship and how close they are, to them literally accusing each other of murder in the second episode.
Huh.
And the friend gets arrested at the end of the episode.
Wait, what?
And so, yeah, and so I love.
Wait, what?
What?
No, hang on. What?
And so,
like these, hold on, you're talking about the two guys in the first
yes.
episode?
Yes, those two guys,
what?
right? And so I was like, oh my god, I don't know how to feel. I'm very confused. I'm very, like, frustrated because I don't know why this is happening. I hope that this is just leading into a thing in the third episode, right? So the third episode comes out. Like, okay, let's figure what happened out. The poet and that friend have like a group of other writer friends, and they're all kind of like, I guess like amateur detectives ish or whatever. Like they get involved in the case and they're trying to figure it out. And so basically you eventually get this testimony from another dude who happened to, I guess, follow these two guys during their whole escapade or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And he sees exactly what happens. He kind of tells it as it is. And he solves the case by basically saying that the poet and the woman that he had set up his friend with, they knew each other on a more personal level than what the poet was letting on. And eventually it comes out that this woman was actually in love with his professor friend. Like, she wanted to be set up in this way to meet him. And so she came to this town, and she ended up working at that brothel so that she could eventually see him. But the problem is that he never once wanted to go to the red light district, like, at all. Like, that's not in his character at all. And so despite the poet trying to, like, you know, set things up between them, kind of make things happen, you know, the friend never wanted to go. And so eventually, when he was finally able to convince this guy to go, it ends kind of like how you would expect, in that he was too embarrassed to, like, actually engage in relations, and it fell apart and he left. And so when the poet came to her room after his friend stormed out, the woman was, like, upset. She was crying, and, like, basically she was brokenhearted. And he got so angry at his friend that later on, when the woman turned up dead, he decided that he was going to accuse his friend of her death.
What the fuck?
And so the revelation, like, is like and by this point, when the guy is, like, explaining what happened and whatever, solving the case, the poet, like, starts laughing. He's like, ha ha ha, like, I knew that this was what was going to happen. Of course, it wasn't in his character to, like, be with her and all that. And he kind of, like, drops, like, a slight line during this episode. He or someone else basically says, kind of implies that, like, what if he's, like, not into women, you know, whatever. But, like, otherwise, it's mostly about him being mad that him trying to set up this woman with his friend just didn't work out, to the point that he decided to accuse his friend of murder because this woman apparently didn't have very long to live. And so when he, I guess, turned her affections away, she decided to take her own life, and that's how she died. And so he got so upset over that he decided to accuse his friend of murder and get him arrested.
Okay.
And so the episode resolves with the police letting the friend go, because I guess the truth gets revealed off screen, or, like, to the police off screen. And he leaves the police station and he runs into his poet friend who's outside, kind of, like, acting like he was just kind of, like, walking by, but not really, like, you know, he's kind of there indignantly. And they're still, like, you know, obviously they're not on good terms because they accused each other of murder. But they actually do talk a little bit. But eventually, I guess the friend, he never tells the friend exactly what happened to make him accuse the guy of murder, but they just kind of, like, let that be. And then the poet punches him in the arm, I guess, like, as retribution or whatever, added anger to whatever, you know, feelings he still had about the whole deal. And then they carry on and that's the end of the episode.
Okay. So, yeah. Okay. As my first kind of, like, foray into analyzing any anime, my first question is of course, why? Like, why?
That's what I want to know.
I don't quite understand the shape of this narrative at all.
Me neither.
This seems to me like the, like, chaotic evil version of Showa Genroku Rakugo Shinju.
Yeah, it does.
Like, somebody took the elements of Rakugo and they were like, what if we made them all bad? What if we made every single part of this bad? I don't.
Oh my god.
I'm like, my
so
brain is trying to, like, understand why any of this might have happened. Like, why? Okay, it's like, one, why is the form of the narrative? Like, two, why is the purpose of the narrative? 3, why? I
The-
just don't get it.
The only reason I could think of that they would tell the narrative in this way, where they would first establish their friendship and then they would break it up, is that they want to get their fighty fight business out the way from the get-go so that they could spend the rest of the series with them, like, learning to cooperate with each other and solve cases together. I don't know why they could just skip all of that and just go directly into the case solving together. Like, they solved the case in the first episode-ish. Like, they didn't even really solve it. He just provided reasonable doubt that the person that the police were accusing of murder may not have been the one who murdered the victim. And that's it. They didn't even solve it. Which I hope will be resolved later. But, oh my god. Because by the end of the series, he has to basically regard this guy as his best friend again. Because that's how the series began, was him in the future saying, my best friend died.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
I don't know what's happening.
That is something.
Anyway, that's that show. I cannot recommend it right now, but, maybe I'll continue watching it if I can summon the willpower to see how it ends.
Fair enough. What a bizarre thing. Well, I guess on that note, we can wrap up.
Let's wrap up.
Why? Maybe there's
I want to know too.
maybe there's just something about Japanese mystery shows that are just like inherently a little like off. Whatever. Okay, well, I suppose thank you for joining us, everybody, on this long and arduous journey through.
We ranted a lot.
Almost 3 hours. We watched a lot this season, or we sampled a lot this season, and we had a lot of feelings. I'm really
impressed.
Yeah, we did. Yeah. We did good. We did good. That's that's Shelter at Home for you, you know. Not time to watch it. I mean, it was also that unnaturally long hiatus we accidentally took.
Yeah, that's true.
Speaking of, and this is just an aside. I'm not calling you out or anything. But I did notice the other day when I was looking at how many video versions we have of our podcast, I was like, oh, we're only like here.
I know. Don't talk about it.
So, you know what?
I'm working through it.
My excuse is I just gave you a little more time to catch up. No worries.
Yeah,
Those will come out when they come out. Don't worry about it too much.
Yeah.
I will not. I will not big grieve you for this. I will not give you grief for it. All right. Well, who are you? Where can we find you on the internet? What are you up to?
You could find me on Twitter, Tumblr, Twitch, Facebook, and all that at SwanDrawn. You can find me on Instagram at swan.drawn. I'm resuming my playthrough of Okami, which is very not rant-inducing because I love that game. It will calm me down when I think about aggravating anime with severe tonal shifts.
Yeah, so it goes. So it goes.
Yeah. How about you, buddy?
You can find me all the places at Literal Soup. I'm really not up to much right now. I'm taking a break from Twitter so that I can get work done. But that should be more or less not the case by the time this episode comes out, I think. I'm not 100% sure. But yeah, I'm not really up to much. I'm kind of just trying to catch up on the work I need to do already. Like, I have a bunch of Patreon stuff that is piling up that I really kind of need to get to because I feel really bad. But I just haven't really had. You know what? It's not even that I haven't necessarily had time to breathe. It's just that I need to take a lot of time to breathe because I don't know. It's a little stressful being in a global pandemic where everything is terrible all the time. That's what I'm up to. I mean, you can always find me here at the podcast. Like that's a thing, I suppose. Or you know, pop a message in the Patreon server, and I'll just we can chat. So our opening is by Scotty Network, and our ending is by Takuma Kata. And the patrons we are thanking this month are Frostfall, Cheru, Sean, Gwen, Claire, Figure 4, and Magpie Mirror Test. Thank you so much for supporting
Wow,
us,
thank
especially
you.
in these trying times.
Especially when we're ranting about a lot of different anime.
Yeah, like it really does mean the world to us. And thank everyone else for listening. And we will
Yeah.
see you next time.
See you next time.
さようなら。また明日ね。